Oh, a new visitor from the woods. Welcome. Are you a lost wanderer, tired from a long journey? Then join me, sit beside the fireplace, and let me tell you some stories that may soothe your mood as you regain your strength. Before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe to the channel. Also comment where you're watching from and what time it is. You all set? Good. Let's start the story with one of the most remarkable magical artifacts ever created by students at Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry, the Marauders map. Picture yourself in the dimly lit corridors of Hogwarts Castle, where the soft golden glow of torchlight flickers against ancient stone walls. Within these hallowed halls, 4 brilliant young wizards once roamed. It's James Potter, Sirius Black, Remus Lupin, and Peter Pettigrew. Together they created a magical document of such complexity and ingenuity that it continues to amaze even the most accomplished witches and wizards to this day. The Marauders map appears at first glance to be nothing more than a blank piece of parchment worn at the edges from years of use and misadventure. But this ordinary appearance is merely the first layer of protection, a clever disguise that hides the map's true nature from prying eyes. To activate the map, one must tap the parchment with their wand and speak the phrase, "I solemnly swear that I am up to no good." These words, chosen with characteristic mischief by its creators, serve as both password and declaration of intent. Only then does the true magic of the map reveal itself. As the words are spoken, thin ink lines spread across the parchment like delicate veins, connecting and branching until they form a perfect representation of Hogwarts Castle. From the highest astronomy tower to the deepest dungeon, every corridor, classroom, and secret passage appears in exquisite detail. The craftsmanship alone would make this an impressive magical achievement, but the true wonder of the Marauders map lies in its ability to show not just the place, but the people. Tiny ink footprints move across the parchment, each labeled with the name of a person currently within the castle grounds. Professors pace in their offices, students gather in common rooms, and even Mrs. Norris, the caretaker's watchful cat, can be seen prowling the corridors. The map shows everyone, regardless of whether they are visible to the naked eye. This remarkable feature reveals the true sophistication of the enchantments employed by the Marauders. The map is not simply a static document but a living, magical creation that continuously updates itself in real time. Consider for a moment the magical theory behind such an achievement. The map must incorporate elements of the homunculus charm, a complex spell that tracks the movements of every person within a defined area. The young wizards who created this map demonstrated an understanding of magical principles far beyond their years. The homunculus charm alone is considered advanced magic, typically not mastered until well after graduation from Hogwarts. Yet these students not only cast it successfully, but modified and expanded it to cover the entirety of one of the largest and most magically complex structures in Britain. Even more impressive is the map's ability to see through magical disguises, polyjuice potion, invisibility cloaks, animagus transformations. None of these can fool the Marauders map. This suggests that its creators found a way to detect the true essence of a person, beyond physical appearance or magical concealment. Imagine the layers of spellwork required to achieve this. The map must first identify every individual within the castle, then accurately track their movements in real time, and finally display this information in a clear and usable format. Each of these functions would be impressive on its own. Combined, they represent a masterpiece of magical craftsmanship. The security features of the map are equally ingenious. When its user has finished consulting it, they must tap it again and declare, "Mischief managed." Only then will the map clear itself, returning to its innocent appearance as a blank piece of parchment. But what happens if someone tries to read the map without knowing the proper password? The Marauders thought of this too. Unauthorized attempts to reveal the map's secrets are met with insults and mockery, written in the distinctive styles of Messrs. Mooney, Wormtail, Padfoot, and Prongs, the self-styled nicknames of the 4 creators. This charm exemplifies the blending of serious magical skill with youthful humor that characterized the Marauders. They created not just a functional magical tool but imbued it with their own personalities and wit. This personal touch is what elevates the Marauders' map from a mere magical object to a true artifact of wizarding ingenuity. The precise spellwork used in the map's creation remains a mystery. The Marauders never documented their methods, and the map itself reveals nothing of how it was made. This is perhaps deliberate, after all. A proper prankster never reveals all their secrets. However, we can speculate on some of the enchantments that might have been employed. Beyond the homunculus charm, the map likely incorporates elements of protean charms, which allow multiple objects to change in sympathy with one another. This would explain how the map updates itself continuously without requiring constant magical maintenance. The security features suggest the use of concealment charms, modified to respond to specific phrases rather than simply hiding the contents from view. The map's ability to detect people regardless of disguise implies some form of identity charm, perhaps similar to those used by Gringotts to prevent imposters from accessing vaults. What makes the Marauders' map truly remarkable is not just the individual spells used in its creation, but how they are woven together into a seamless whole. The magic of the map is layered and interconnected, each enchantment supporting and enhancing the others. This level of magical integration is rarely seen outside the work of master enchanters. Consider, too, the magical knowledge required to map Hogwarts itself. The castle is notorious for its changing floor plan. Staircases move, rooms appear and disappear, and entire sections seem to rearrange themselves at whim. Yet the Marauders' map accurately depicts all of this, suggesting that its creators found a way to tie their enchantments to the very magic that governs the castle's structure. The hours of exploration, the careful observation, the trial and error that must have gone into creating such a perfect representation of Hogwarts speaks to the dedication of the four friends who made it. The Marauders' map was not simply a clever prank or a tool for mischief-making set, though it certainly served those purposes well. It was a labor of love, a testament to friendship, and a celebration of the magic that brought these four young wizards together. In the years that followed its creation, the Marauders' map would pass through several hands, confiscated by caretaker Argus Filch, stolen by Fred and George Weasley, and eventually given to Harry Potter Set, the son of one of its creators, Set. The map continued to reveal its secrets to new generations of Hogwarts students, and perhaps that was always its purpose. The Marauders created more than just a magical document. They created a legacy. Through the map, their knowledge of Hogwarts secrets, their magical skill, and even their distinct personalities lived on long after they had left the school's hallowed halls. As the fire crackles and the shadows grow longer, I invite you to reflect on this remarkable magical achievement. The Marauders' map stands as a testament to what can be accomplished when friendship, intelligence, and magical skill come together in perfect harmony. What hidden talents might you possess that, when combined with those of trusted friends, could create something equally extraordinary? And what secrets might you discover if you had such a map to guide your way through the twisting corridors of your own life? Chapter 2. The construction of Hogwarts Castle. Stone upon ancient stone, magic woven into every foundation. Hogwarts Castle stands as perhaps the greatest architectural achievement in the history of wizardkind. As moonlight filters through our window and the embers glow softly in the hearth, let us delve into the remarkable story of how four extraordinary wizards created not just a school, but a living monument to magical craftsmanship that has withstood the test of time for over 1,000 years. Long before the Statute of Secrecy, in a time when the divide between magical and non-magical folk was growing increasingly perilous, four of the greatest witches and wizards of the age came together with a shared vision. Godric Gryffindor, Helga Hufflepuff, Rowena Ravenclaw, and Salazar Slytherin sought to create a haven where young witches and wizards could learn their craft safely, away from the suspicion and persecution that was becoming all too common. The site they chose speaks volumes about their foresight. Nestled in the Scottish Highlands, far from prying eyes, they selected a location of natural beauty and power. The land itself was said to be saturated with ambient magic, a place where the veil between our world and others grows thin. Such locations have always been prized for magical construction, as they provide a natural foundation that enhances and supports magical architecture. Imagine standing there with the founders, looking out over the vast, untouched landscape, sip the glittering black lake, the dense forest, the rolling hills and envisioning the magnificent structure that would soon rise from the earth. Each founder brought unique talents and magical specialties to the monumental task ahead. Rowena Ravenclaw, renowned for her intelligence and creativity, is credited with designing the overall structure of the castle. Historical accounts suggest she created intricate magical blueprints that could shift and adapt, demonstrating the castle's eventual layout from every angle. These were not mere drawings but magical projections that allowed the other founders to literally walk through her vision before a single stone was laid. Helga Hufflepuff, with her extraordinary talent for charms related to food and comfort, focused on creating spaces that would nurture both body and soul. The kitchens, common rooms, and the enchanted ceiling of the Great Hall all bear her magical signature. It was Hufflepuff who established the deep connection with the house elves, who would maintain the castle, creating a symbiotic relationship that has lasted for centuries. Godric Gryffindor, master of transfiguration and defensive magic, contributed the castle's remarkable defensive capabilities. The outer walls were not merely built but transfigured, each stone imbued with protective enchantments so powerful that they continue to function perfectly after a millennium. The moving staircases, often attributed to Ravenclaw's design, were actually Gryffindor's creation, intended as a defensive measure that could rearrange the castle's internal layout in times of siege. Salazar Slytherin, before his departure, focused his considerable talents on the castle's foundations and the elaborate network of chambers and passages beneath. A master of magical construction related to water and stone, Slytherin created the intricate plumbing systems centuries before Muggles would develop similar technology. The dungeons, with their perfect temperature regulation regardless of outside conditions, showcase his subtle but powerful magic. The actual construction process likely took several decades, although wizard historians debate the exact timeline. What is clear is that the founders did not work alone. Historical records mention a gathering of magical artisans, stone callers, element binders, and even magical creatures who contributed their unique abilities to the construction. Dwarf stonemasons may have been involved in the initial quarrying and shaping of the massive foundation stones. These blocks, some weighing several tons, bear distinctive markings still visible in the deepest parts of the castle. Goblin silversmiths crafted many of the original fixtures and fittings, explaining their remarkable durability and resistance to tarnish. Forest trolls, more intelligent and cooperative than their mountain cousins, are mentioned in some accounts as having provided the raw strength needed to position the largest architectural elements. Evidence suggests that merpeople from the Black Lake contributed to the underwater portions of the foundations, using magic unknown to human wizards to ensure the castle would never sink into the soft lake shore, despite its tremendous weight. The most fascinating aspect of Hogwarts construction, however, is how the founders went beyond merely building a structure set. They created a semi-sentient magical entity. The castle is not simply enchanted, it is, in some difficult-to-define way, alive. It adapts and changes, responds to the needs of its inhabitants, and even seems to have moods and preferences of its own. The moving staircases are the most obvious manifestation of this quasi-sentience. They shift not randomly, as is sometimes assumed, but with purpose. Longtime residents of the castle often report that the staircases seem to help those in genuine need, providing shortcuts in emergencies, while playfully misdirecting those who are up to no good. The Room of Requirement represents perhaps the pinnacle of this responsive magic, a space that transforms itself completely based on the needs of the seeker. It demonstrates the founders' extraordinary foresight in creating a castle that could adapt to generations of future students whose needs they could not possibly predict. The very stones of Hogwarts contain memory. Portraits serve as advisors and record keepers. Stairs remember which steps should be skipped. Doors recognize certain individuals and grant or deny access accordingly. This network of semi-conscious magic creates not just a building, but an environment that learns and grows alongside its inhabitants. The structural magic of the castle extends beyond mere walls and floors. Consider the enchanted ceiling of the Great Hall, a feat of magic so complex that modern wizards can only maintain it, not replicate it. This is not a simple illusion but a kind of magical window that connects the interior space to the actual sky above, filtering out inclement weather while preserving the view. The dormitories represent another marvel of magical construction. They expand or contract based on the number of students in each house, ensuring that each year has appropriate accommodations. The beds themselves are positioned for optimal comfort depending on each occupant, subtly shifting during the night to provide better rest. Even the foundations of Hogwarts demonstrate magical innovation beyond their time. Built partially on marshy ground beside the lake, the castle should, by all physical laws, have begun to sink or tilt centuries ago. Yet it remains perfectly level, the stones of its foundation constantly making minute magical adjustments to maintain perfect equilibrium. The defensive capabilities built into the castle walls have proven their worth time and again throughout Hogwarts' long history. During the darkest days of wizarding wars, the castle has served as a sanctuary and fortress. The outer walls can absorb tremendous magical energy from attacking spells, actually growing stronger rather than weaker under assault. Perhaps most remarkable is how the castle has accommodated centuries of magical education, adapting to changing curricula and requirements. Classrooms resize themselves based on subject needs, dungeons maintain perfect conditions for potion brewing, and the astronomy tower offers an unparalleled view of the night sky unaffected by weather or light pollution. The agricultural magic woven into the grounds surrounding the castle ensures that Hogwarts has always been largely self-sufficient. The greenhouses, while obviously added centuries after the original construction, were planned for in the initial design. The soil in their location was magically prepared to support even the most exotic magical plants, and the water supply was imbued with properties that enhance growth and potency. As centuries passed, successive headmasters and headmistresses have added their own contributions to the castle, yet always working within the magical framework established by the founders. Armando Dippet added the elaborate system of magical chimneys that keep the castle warm throughout the harsh Scottish winters without producing smoke or requiring fuel. Albus Dumbledore strengthened the ancient wards protecting the castle, layering new protective enchantments over those cast by Gryffindor a millennium earlier. Perhaps the greatest testament to the founder's skill is how the castle has remained, not just standing but thriving after 1,000 years. Muggle structures of similar age require constant maintenance and restoration. Hogwarts largely maintains itself. The stone stairs, worn by countless students' feet, gradually restore their shape overnight. Damaged walls heal themselves, and the massive beams supporting the ceiling have never rotted or weakened. The construction of Hogwarts Castle represents not just a physical achievement, but a philosophical one. It embodies the belief that magic at its finest should serve generations yet unborn, that knowledge is a treasure to be protected and nurtured, and that by working together, witches and wizards of different talents and temperaments can create something far greater than any could achieve alone. As we feel the weight of history settling comfortably around us like a warm cloak, we might wonder, what would the founders think if they could see their creation today? Would they recognize the school they built with such care and vision? And what secret rooms and passages might still lie undiscovered within the ancient walls of Hogwarts Castle, waiting for the right seeker to reveal their mysteries? Chapter 3. The Mischief of the Marauders. Laughter echoes through time just as surely as great deeds of heroism or villainy. As our candles burn low and shadows dance across the ancient tomes surrounding us, let us turn our attention to four remarkable friends whose bond of brotherhood and legendary escapades left an indelible mark on Hogwarts' history scent. The self-proclaimed Marauders. In the early 1970s, four young Gryffindor boys formed a friendship that would alter the course of wizarding history, though none could have predicted it at the time. James Potter, Sirius Black, Remus Lupin, and Peter Pettigrew, set of four names that would later become entangled with both the darkest and brightest chapters of the First Wizarding War. But before they became soldiers in that conflict, they were simply schoolboys with an extraordinary talent for mischief-making. James Potter arrived at Hogwarts as the only child of elderly parents who had long given up hope of having a family. Talented, wealthy, and perhaps a bit spoiled, young James possessed natural confidence that bordered on arrogance. With his untidy black hair and quick smile, he immediately distinguished himself on the Quidditch pitch, where his abilities as a chaser were quickly recognized as exceptional even by upperclassmen. Sirius Black presented a study in contrasts. The heir to one of Wizarding Britain's oldest and most notorious pure-blood families, he arrived at Hogwarts, bearing the weight of centuries of Slytherin tradition, sit only to become the first Black in generations to be sorted into Gryffindor, handsome, charismatic, and nursing a deep rebellious streak. Sirius found in James a kindred spirit, and their friendship was cemented almost immediately. Remus Lupin entered Hogwarts harboring a terrible secret. Bitten by the werewolf Fenrir Greyback as a young child, Remus had resigned himself to a lonely existence on the fringes of society. Only through Albus Dumbledore's intervention was he permitted to attend Hogwarts at all, with elaborate precautions taken to protect both Remus and his fellow students during his monthly transformations. Quiet, studious, and perpetually worried about discovery, Remus found himself unexpectedly drawn into friendship with James and Sirius. Peter Pettigrew completed the quartet. Smaller and less naturally gifted than his friends, Peter nevertheless possessed qualities that earned him a place in their circle. Some accounts describe him as an excellent audience, always appreciative of James and Sirius's performances, while others suggest he had a talent for getting into places others couldn't access, his skill valuable to pranksters. Whatever the initial attraction, Peter was welcomed warmly into what would become known as the Marauders. The name Marauders was not immediately adopted. Like many enduring traditions, it evolved organically, first as a description used by exasperated teachers, was marauding boys again, then embraced with pride by the four friends themselves. By their third year, they had fully embraced the title, signing confiscated notes and enchanted items with their collective identity. What set the Marauders apart from ordinary mischief-makers was the extraordinary magical skill they brought to their escapades. Even as underclassmen, they demonstrated magical aptitude well beyond their years. James and Sirius, in particular, showed prodigious talent in transfiguration, while Remus excelled in defense against the dark arts. Even Peter, though less consistently brilliant, showed remarkable determination in mastering difficult magic when properly motivated. Their pranks began simply enough. Sit enchanted snowballs that followed specific targets, temporary transfigurations of corridor statues, or charmed suits of armor that recited inappropriate poetry when professors walked past. But as their magical abilities grew, so did the complexity of their mischief. During their third year, a watershed moment occurred in the Marauders' friendship. Through careful observation and deduction, James, Sirius, and Peter discovered Remus's carefully guarded lycanthropy. Rather than reacting with fear or rejection, James immediately proposed a solution so audacious, so dangerous, and so technically difficult that it would have been dismissed as impossible by most adult wizards. They would become animagi to accompany Remus during his transformations. The animagious transformation is among the most difficult magical processes known to wizard kind. Most fully qualified wizards and witches never attempt it, and those who do often spend years in preparation. That 3 underage wizards undertook the process in secret, without supervision, and successfully completed it by their 5th year stands as a testament to both their magical ability and their loyalty to their friend. It took them nearly 3 years of intense study, practice, and numerous painful setbacks. The process involved holding a mandrake leaf in the mouth for an entire month, creating a complex potion that had to be influenced by specific lunar phases, and regular incantations that had to be performed at sunrise and sunset. A single mistake at any point meant starting the entire process again. The danger was extreme. The potion itself could cause permanent disfigurement if brewed incorrectly. The transformation, if improperly executed, could result in horrific half-human, half-animal states from which there might be no recovery. And of course, if discovered, they faced potential expulsion and even criminal charges, as unregistered animagi are strictly regulated by wizarding law. Yet they persevered, driven by their friendship with Remus, and undoubtedly by the allure of attempting magic that adult wizards would have deemed beyond their capabilities. By their 5th year, all 3 had successfully completed the transformation. James became a magnificent stag, earning the nickname Prongs. Sirius transformed into a large black dog, thus Padfoot. Peter, perhaps surprisingly, mastered the transformation into a rat, becoming Wormtail. Remus, though not an animagus, completed the group as Moony Set, a reference to his lunar-influenced condition. With their animagus forms mastered, the Marauders embarked on monthly adventures that would have horrified the school administration had they known. During full moons, they would accompany Remus Dest, transformed into a werewolf Cest, on explorations of the Hogwarts grounds and the nearby village of Hogsmeade. James and Sirius, in their larger animal forms, could keep the werewolf in check should he become aggressive, while Peter's small rat form allowed him to slip beneath the immobilized Whomping Willow to grant them access to the secret passage that led to the Shrieking Shack, where Remus underwent his painful transformations. These monthly excursions led to an unprecedented familiarity with the castle and its surroundings. The Marauders discovered secret passages, hidden rooms, and forgotten corners of Hogwarts that had perhaps been unknown for centuries. This knowledge would eventually be codified in their masterpiece of magical mischief, the Marauder's Map. But not all of their adventures were tied to Remus's condition. As their confidence grew, so did the scale of their pranks. During their 6th year, they famously enchanted the suits of armor throughout the castle to follow members of the Slytherin Quidditch team, mimicking their movements in exaggerated fashion for the 3 days leading up to an important match. Another legendary incident involved charming the ceiling of the Great Hall to snow exclusively over the Slytherin table set, but the snow would disappear before reaching any food or parchment, leaving the Slytherins mystified as to why only they felt constantly damp. Professor Minerva McGonagall, while officially disapproving of their behavior, is reported to have privately acknowledged that James and Sirius were 2 of the most talented Transfiguration students she had ever taught. Professor Flitwick similarly noted Remus's exceptional aptitude for charms. Even Peter, often overshadowed by his more flamboyant friends, received recognition for his surprising ability to master difficult magical concepts when sufficiently motivated. Not all of their activities were harmless fun, it must be noted. The long-standing animosity between James Potter and Severus Snape occasionally led to pranks that crossed the line into bullying. One particularly serious incident nearly resulted in tragedy when Sirius, in a moment of reckless anger, told Snape how to access the tunnel beneath the Whomping Willow on a full moon night. Had James not had a change of heart and intervened at the last moment, Snape might have encountered the fully transformed Remus Cest, with potentially fatal consequences. This incident created the only serious rift between James and Sirius during their school years and served as a sobering reminder of the potential consequences of their recklessness. It marked a turning point, particularly for James, whose behavior gradually became less arrogant in the years that followed. The Marauders' final years at Hogwarts coincided with the rising threat of Lord Voldemort. The carefree atmosphere that had characterized their early schooling gradually gave way to a more somber reality as news of disappearances and deaths filtered into the school. For James and Sirius in particular, This external threat seems to have accelerated their maturation process. By their 7th year, James had been appointed head boy Test, a development that reportedly shocked even him Test, and had successfully wooed Lily Evans, the brilliant Muggle-born witch, who had previously dismissed him as an arrogant troublemaker. Sirius, meanwhile, had been disowned by his pure-blood-obsessed family, and had taken refuge with the Potters, whom he would later describe as the only real family he had ever known. As graduation approached, the 4 friends faced a world increasingly divided by Voldemort's ideology. They would all choose to fight against the rising darkness, joining the Order of the Phoenix shortly after leaving Hogwarts. The skills they had honed through years of magical mischief would soon be redirected toward a deadlier purpose. Yet despite the darkness that would eventually envelope their adult lives, Sid Pettigrew's betrayal, James and Lily's murder, Sirius's false imprisonment, and Remus's years of lonely isolation sent, there remains something eternally bright about the memory of the Marauders in their prime. 4 brilliant young wizards, bound by friendship and adventure, who roamed the moonlit grounds of Hogwarts and left behind a legacy of magical ingenuity that would later serve their children and their children's friends in ways they could never have imagined. The Marauders' map, their greatest magical achievement, would eventually find its way into the hands of James's son Harry Potter. The secret passages they discovered would provide escape routes for students fleeing persecution during Hogwarts' darkest hours, and the lesson of their friendship too, that loyalty and love can inspire magical achievements beyond one's years too, would echo through the halls of Hogwarts long after the sound of their laughter had faded. As our candle burns low, and the tale of these 4 remarkable friends draws to a close, perhaps we might reflect on our own friendships. Do we possess the loyalty that would drive us to master seemingly impossible magic for the sake of a suffering friend? Would we have the courage to run with wolves beneath the light of the full moon? And in a world increasingly divided, could we maintain the bonds of brotherhood against the forces that would tear us apart? Chapter 4. The Ethics of Defense Against the Dark Arts. Behind every spell lies intention, and within every defense, a choice. As the embers shift in our hearth, and the shadows lengthen across the room, let us explore one of the most fascinating and morally complex subjects taught at Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry: Self-Defense Against the Dark Arts. This is not merely a tale of incantations and wand movements, but a philosophical journey through the subtle boundaries between protection and harm, between justified defense and the seductive pull of dark magic itself. Defense against the dark arts has held a unique place in the Hogwarts curriculum since the school's founding over 1,000 years ago. Unlike subjects such as transfiguration or charms, which focus primarily on the technical aspects of spellcasting, defense against the dark arts carries an inherent moral dimension. Students learn not only how to recognize and counter dark forces, but must also wrestle with questions that have challenged wizardkind for centuries. What constitutes dark magic? When is force justified? And how does one defend without becoming that which they oppose? The very name of the subject reveals its philosophical underpinnings. It is not simply defensive magic, but specifically defense against the dark arts. This terminology acknowledges that certain types of magic are fundamentally different from others, not merely in technique but in essence. Yet the definition of what makes magic dark has evolved throughout wizarding history, reflecting the moral and ethical standards of each era. In the time of the founders, dark magic was primarily understood as that which caused deliberate harm or violated natural laws. Godric Gryffindor, who some historians believe was the first defense teacher at Hogwarts, emphasized countering direct magical threats, set primarily from magical creatures and hostile wizards. Historical records suggest his approach was straightforward and practical, focusing on courage and quick thinking rather than moral ambiguity. Gradually, as wizarding society developed more complex ethical frameworks, so too did the understanding of dark magic. By the medieval period, defense against the dark arts had expanded to include protection against subtle forms of magical influence, mind control, emotional manipulation, and magical deception. This evolution recognized that not all dark magic announced itself with flashes of light or dramatic effects. Some of the most insidious threats worked through whispers rather than shouts. The curriculum continued to evolve through the centuries, each era bringing new emphases, reflecting contemporary concerns. During periods of goblin rebellion, defense against non-human magic gained prominence. When wizard-muggle relations were particularly strained, protection against witch-hunting tactics became essential knowledge. The subject has always been somewhat fluid, adapting to the perceived threats of the day while maintaining core principles of magical protection. Perhaps no other subject at Hogwarts has seen such variety in teaching approaches. It's a fact exacerbated in modern times by the position's notorious curse that prevented any professor from holding the post for more than a single academic year. This revolving door of instructors brought wildly different philosophies and emphases to the classroom, giving students who completed all 7 years of education a remarkably diverse understanding of defensive magic. Consider the contrast between Professor Galatea Merrythought, who taught for nearly 50 years before the curse took effect, and more recent instructors. Merrythought emphasized a balanced approach that combined theoretical understanding with practical application. Her students, including a young Tom Riddle, gained comprehensive knowledge that unfortunately served some for dark purposes, but a reminder that education itself is morally neutral until applied by its recipient. The brief tenure of Alastair Mad-Eye Moody, though later revealed to be Barty Crouch Jr. in disguise, brought a hardened Auror's perspective to the classroom. His infamous demonstration of the unforgivable curses to fourth-year students crossed traditional ethical boundaries of wizarding education, but raised essential questions about preparedness. Is it better to shelter young minds from the reality of dark magic, or does true defense require unflinching exposure to what one might face? Dolores Umbridge represented the opposite extreme sit, a purely theoretical approach that deliberately avoided practical defensive training. Her curriculum reflected a political philosophy that feared empowering students more than it feared the dark forces they might eventually face. This approach demonstrated how defense education could become entangled with power structures and control mechanisms within wizarding society. Remus Lupin, widely regarded as one of the most effective defense professors in recent Hogwarts history, brought yet another perspective. His focus on dark creatures stemmed partly from personal experience, but reflected a broader philosophy that defense begins with understanding. By teaching students to recognize the specific characteristics and vulnerabilities of dark entities, from boggarts to werewolves, he emphasized that fear itself could be overcome through knowledge and preparation. Severus Snape, when finally achieving his long-desired position as defense professor, brought the perspective of one who had walked both paths. Subus, having practiced dark arts himself before turning to defense. His approach was unflinchingly realistic, even harsh, acknowledging that dark magic is ever-changing and adaptable, requiring constant vigilance and adaptation from those who would counter it. The ethical complexities of defense education were perhaps most clearly embodied in Albus Dumbledore's approach to the subject. Though never a permanent defense professor himself, his influence shaped the curriculum for generations. Dumbledore understood that defense was not merely about spells and counter-curses, but about choices and intentions. He recognized that the most powerful protection against darkness comes not from magical skill alone, but from the capacity for love, friendship, and sacrifice, qualities no amount of technical training can instill. At the heart of defense against the dark arts lies a profound paradox. To truly defend against dark magic, one must understand it deeply, perhaps even experience its temptations firsthand. Yet in doing so, one risks corruption. The history of the subject is filled with cautionary tales of defense specialists who, in seeking to understand their adversaries, became that which they once opposed. The curse upon the defense against the dark arts position, though widely attributed to Tom Riddle, after being denied the post-soft, represents more than mere spite. It symbolizes the inherent instability of the boundary between defense and dark arts. The position could not be held long, because the knowledge itself is transformative, shifting the teacher even as the teacher attempts to define and contain the subject. This brings us to perhaps the most ethically challenging aspect of defensive magic education, the thin line between defensive and offensive spell work. Many spells taught as defensive can cause significant harm when applied with different intent. A shield charm might deflect a curse back upon its caster. A stunning spell, while temporarily incapacitating, can cause serious injury under certain circumstances. Even the seemingly innocent disarming charm can prove deadly if it separates a wizard from their wand while in a precarious position. This blurred boundary is exemplified in the controversial teaching of jinxes and hexes, which occupy a middle ground between harmless charms and truly dark curses. These spells are designed to cause discomfort or temporary disadvantage rather than lasting harm, yet they intentionally inflict negative effects upon their targets. Are such spells properly defensive, or do they represent the first steps along a path that leads eventually to the unforgivable curses? The curriculum has never fully resolved this tension, with different professors drawing the line at different points. The psychological impact of defense education presents another ethical dimension. Learning to defend oneself against dark magic requires facing fear and confronting uncomfortable realities. For young wizards and witches, this exposure can be traumatic if not carefully managed, yet insufficient preparation leaves them vulnerable to real-world threats. Each defense professor must balance psychological readiness with emotional well-being, a calculus that changes with each student's temperament and life experience. Consider the teaching of defense against the imperious curse. Practice in resisting this unforgivable curse provides invaluable preparation against mind control, yet subjecting students to the experience of having their will overridden even in a controlled environment, raises serious ethical questions about consent and psychological impact. Is the potential trauma justified by the protective benefit? Again, different professors have reached different conclusions. Beyond the classroom, the ethics of defensive magic extend into questions of justice and proportionality. When is lethal force justified against a dark wizard? Should aurors be permitted to use dark magic themselves when fighting those who would do worse? The famous debate between Bartemius Crouch Sr. and Albus Dumbledore during the First Wizarding War exemplified this tension. Crouch advocated fighting fire with fire, authorizing aurors to use unforgivable curses, while Dumbledore warned that abandoning ethical constraints would erase the very distinction they were fighting to preserve. This debate played out again during the Second Wizarding War, particularly within the Order of the Phoenix. Some members, like Remus Lupin and Kingsley Shacklebolt, generally adhered to non-lethal defensive tactics even against Death Eaters. Others, particularly Alastor Moody, were known to employ more aggressive methods. Harry Potter himself faced this ethical dilemma repeatedly, ultimately choosing to rely primarily on defensive and disarming spells, even when facing Lord Voldemort's a choice that would prove more powerful than any curse. The creation of Dumbledore's army during Umbridge's tenure represents another fascinating ethical dimension of defense education. When the institution failed to provide necessary knowledge, students took education into their own hands, forming an unauthorized study group to learn practical defensive magic. This act of educational rebellion raised questions about authority, responsibility, and the right to self-protection. Was breaking school rules justified by the greater ethical imperative of preparation against dark forces? Most observers of wizarding history have concluded it was. Perhaps the most profound ethical question underlying defense against the dark arts is whether dark magic corrupts inherently or only through intent. Are certain spells and practices fundamentally evil, or does the morality reside entirely in the heart of the caster? This philosophical question has divided magical theorists for centuries and continues to influence approaches to defense education. The Hogwarts curriculum has generally taken a middle path on this question, teaching that while intent matters tremendously, certain magic carries inherent dangers beyond the immediate intention. Horcruxes, for instance, are considered inherently corrupting regardless of the creator's stated purpose. Other magic falls into grayer territory, with effects that depend greatly on the specific application and intention behind it. In preparing young witches and wizards to face the darkness that exists both in the world and potentially within themselves, defense against the dark arts serves a purpose far beyond mere self-protection. It teaches discernment, judgment, and the recognition that power carries responsibility. It acknowledges that we all face choices between what is right and what is easy, between fear and courage, between control and freedom. As our discussion of this most complex subject draws to a close, and as the fire burns low in our hearth, perhaps we should consider what darkness might we face in our own lives, and how have we prepared to defend not just our physical selves, but our principles and compassion. For in the end, the most important defense against darkness may not be found in spells and incantations, but in the choices we make and the values we refuse to compromise, even when standing alone against the gathering. Dark. Chapter 5. The Wonder of Diagon Alley. Cobblestones polished by centuries of footsteps, shop windows that shimmer with magical curiosities, and the gentle hum of spells mingling with lively conversation. There exists a place where the boundary between mundane and magical dissolves like morning mist. As we settle in this evening, with the soft patter of rain against our windows, let us wander through the winding pathways of Britain's most renowned magical shopping district, a place that has served as the commercial and cultural heart of wizarding London for over 5 centuries. Diagon Alley. Hidden in plain sight within the bustling metropolis of London, Diagon Alley represents one of the most remarkable feats of magical concealment in Britain. To the Muggle eye, the entrance appears as nothing more than a weathered brick wall behind an unremarkable pub called the Leaky Cauldron. This deliberate obscurity speaks to the ingenuity of the medieval wizards who established the district during a time when relations between magical and non-magical communities were growing increasingly strained. Historical records from the Wizengamot archives suggest that Diagon Alley was formally established around 1500, though magical merchants had been gathering informally in the area for at least 2 centuries prior. The name itself offers a linguistic clue to its origins, Tit Diagon, being a playful inversion of the word diagonal, referring to how the street cuts across what Muggles would perceive as existing city blocks. This magical insertion of space where none should exist represents some of the most sophisticated spatial enchantments in Britain, maintained through centuries by successive generations of ministry officials. Before we stroll down the alley itself, we must first pass through its gatekeeper, the Leaky Cauldron. This unassuming establishment serves as more than mere camouflage for the magical world beyond. It represents the literal and symbolic threshold between magical and Muggle London. Founded by Daisy Dotteridge in 1500 to serve as a gateway between the non-wizarding world and Diagon Alley, the Leaky Cauldron has remained remarkably unchanged through the centuries. Its low ceilings, perpetually smoky interior, and collection of mismatched furniture create an atmosphere that immediately signals to visitors that they have left the ordinary world behind. The concealment of Diagon Alley goes beyond simple invisibility charms. The entire street exists in what magical theorists describe as a folded space, a dimensional pocket that occupies the same physical location as Muggle buildings, but remains entirely separate from them. This magical architecture allows Diagon Alley to be substantially larger on the inside than its London footprint would suggest, a principle similar to, but more extensive than the extension charms used in wizarding tents and trunks. To enter Diagon Alley proper requires a specific sequence of brick tapping with a wand set, a security measure that ensures only those with magical knowledge can gain entry. This enchanted wall represents one of the oldest continuously functioning magical barriers in Britain, having operated without significant modification since its creation. The bricks that reorganize themselves to form an archway are part of a sophisticated spell network that recognizes magical signatures and intent, opening more readily for those with benign purposes while subtly resisting those with malicious aims. Once through the archway, first-time visitors often find themselves momentarily overwhelmed by the sensory tapestry that unfolds before them. Unlike the rigid grid patterns of Muggle cities, Diagon Alley follows a more organic layout, winding and curving in ways that seem to defy conventional geometry. This deliberate design choice reflects medieval wizarding architecture, which often incorporated elements meant to confuse malevolent magical entities believed to be able to travel only in straight lines, the superstition long since disproven, but preserved in the alley's charming irregularity. The buildings themselves represent a hodgepodge of architectural styles spanning centuries, from timber-framed Tudor establishments to Victorian stone facades, often modified by magical means to remain standing despite apparent structural impossibilities. Many lean at precarious angles, with upper stories extending far beyond their foundations, held in place not by physics but by permanent balancing and support charms that have been renewed and strengthened through generations. At the heart of Diagon Alley's economic life stands Gringotts Wizarding Bank, its snow-white marble facade and burnished bronze doors projecting an aura of unassailable security. Founded in 1474 by the Goblin Gringott, the bank predates the formal establishment of Diagon Alley itself, and was likely the anchor around which the shopping district eventually coalesced. The decision to place the wizarding world's financial center in London, rather than Hogsmeade, Britain's only all-wizarding village, reflected the growing importance of international trade in the late medieval magical economy and London's status as a global port city. The relationship between Gringotts and Diagon Alley exemplifies the complex interdependence of wizarding economic systems. The bank's presence provides security that attracts merchants, while the concentration of commerce justifies the bank's location. Deep beneath the cobblestones, an extensive network of Gringotts vaults extends far beyond the apparent boundaries of Diagon Alley, protected by layers of goblin magic that remain largely inscrutable to wizard kind even today. Moving along the main thoroughfare, one encounters establishments that have served the wizarding community for centuries, each with its own unique history and character. Ollivander's, with its dusty window displaying a single wand on a faded purple cushion, has been makers of fine wands since 382 B.C., making it not only the oldest shop in Diagon Alley, but possibly the oldest continuously operated business in the wizarding world. The accumulated magical residue of thousands of wands stored within its walls has created an atmosphere so dense with latent magic that sensitive individuals report feeling a slight tingle upon entering. Flourish and Blots, the primary bookseller for generations of Hogwarts students and the wider wizarding community, began as a modest scroll shop in the early 1500s, before expanding to include bound books as they became more common. Its labyrinthine interior, with towering bookshelves that require enchanted ladders to navigate, houses one of the most comprehensive collections of magical texts available to the public. The protective charms on more dangerous volumes, some of which have been known to snap at unwary fingers or emit alarming sounds when disturbed. Saura represents some of the most sophisticated containment magic practiced in a commercial setting. Madame Malkin's robes for all occasions, quality Quidditch supplies, Elop's Owl Emporium, Potage's Cauldron Shop Tiss. Each establishment represents not merely a business, but a repository of specialized magical knowledge passed through generations of proprietors. Many shops operate as family businesses, with magical techniques and trade secrets handed down from parent to child alongside the physical premises. The apothecary, with its barrels of slimy substances and jars of herbs, parts, and powders, connects Diagon Alley to global magical trade networks that have existed for millennia. Ingredients sourced from magical creatures and plants across 6 continents make their way to these specialized shops, often through complex import arrangements overseen by the Department of International Magical Cooperation. The regulation of this trade particularly of substances derived from protected magical species T represents one of the ministry's most challenging enforcement areas. Beyond these established businesses, Diagon Alley hosts a vibrant ecosystem of street vendors, seasonal stalls, and temporary merchants who add to the district's dynamic character. During the weeks before a new Hogwarts term begins, the alley swells with additional carts selling everything from magical study aids to specialized trunk organizing systems designed to help students manage their school supplies. The seasonal rhythms of Diagon Alley reflect the broader cultural calendar of Wizarding Britain. Winter holidays bring elaborate decorations that go far beyond Muggle capabilities, Tess icicles that sing in harmonized chorus, never-melting snow sculptures that change poses throughout the day, and enchanted wreaths of holly that gently warm nearby window shoppers. The weeks preceding Halloween see shops stocked with specialized decorations and costumes, while Valentine's Day brings an influx of love potion ingredients, strictly regulated, of course, and magical gifts designed to express affection. Economically, Diagon Alley functions as more than a mere marketplace. It serves as an incubator for magical innovation, a showcase for international magical goods, and a financial hub through which significant portions of wizarding wealth circulate. The concentration of magical businesses creates opportunities for collaboration and competition that drive advancements in commercial spellwork and enchanted products. The social significance of Diagon Alley extends beyond commerce. For many Muggle-born witches and wizards, their first visit to purchase school supplies represents their initial immersion in magical culture. The experience of walking those ancient cobblestones often serves as a crucial transition point, making the abstract concept of belonging to the wizarding world tangibly real. For pure-blood and half-blood families, the alley serves as a traditional gathering place where chance encounters with friends, colleagues, and classmates strengthen the social fabric of magical Britain. During times of conflict within the wizarding world, Diagon Alley has often reflected the broader societal tensions. During the First Wizarding War, increased security measures and a reduction in nighttime operating hours changed the character of the district. The Second Wizarding War saw even more dramatic transformations, with many shops boarding up their windows or closing altogether. The appearance of street vendors selling questionable protective amulets spoke to the atmosphere of fear, while the stark contrast between the abandoned shops and Weasley's Wizard Wheeze's vibrant facade demonstrated the resilience of some in the face of darkness. The history of Diagon Alley also includes darker chapters that reflect the prejudices and struggles within wizarding society. Nocturne Alley, the shadowy offshoot that specializes in objects related to the dark arts, exists in an uncertain legal and social territory. The relationship between these two connected but distinct shopping areas mirrors the wizarding world's complicated relationship with magic that exists in moral gray areas. In the years following the defeat of Lord Voldemort, Diagon Alley underwent a renaissance. Shops reopened with new vigor, and innovative businesses established themselves alongside traditional establishments. This period of renewal demonstrated the resilience of wizarding commerce and culture, with the alley once again serving as a vibrant heart of magical London. The magical protections surrounding Diagon Alley have evolved over centuries in response to changing threats and technologies. While the original concealment charms focused primarily on hiding the district from Muggle eyes, modern enchantments incorporate sophisticated detection systems that alert authorities to potentially dangerous magical items being brought into the crowded shopping area. The balance between security and the free flow of commerce represents an ongoing challenge for those responsible for the alley's safety. For all its historical significance and magical wonder, perhaps what makes Diagon Alley truly special is how it brings together the mundane and the miraculous. It is a place where an ordinary task like shopping becomes an extraordinary adventure, where practical necessities like cauldrons and quills exist alongside fantastical luxuries like self-stirring silver spoons and miniature working model galaxies and glass spheres. As our journey through this magical marketplace draws to a close, and as the imagined sounds of shopkeepers closing up for the evening fade into the background, we might consider what hidden places of wonder might exist in our own world, tucked away behind ordinary facades. And if you could bring home just one treasure from Diagon Alley's many shops, what would you choose to keep beside you as a reminder that magic in all its forms, exists just beyond our everyday perception. Chapter 6. The history of the Invisibility Cloak. There are objects in the wizarding world that transcend mere enchantment to become legendary scent artifacts whose origins blur the boundary between history and myth. As twilight deepens outside our windows and shadows dance across ancient volumes, let us unfold the tale of perhaps the most elusive magical creation ever known, the Invisibility Cloak. Not just any invisibility cloak, mind you, but the one that would eventually find its way to Harry Potter's sooty, a relic with a lineage as old as death itself. The concept of invisibility has fascinated wizard kind since our earliest attempts at magic. Ancient Egyptian wizards created burial shrouds with primitive concealment charms, while Chinese magical scrolls from the 3rd century describe experiments with transparency potions applied to silk. Throughout magical history, the desire to move unseen has inspired countless innovations, but true invisibility remained elusive for millennia. Conventional invisibility cloaks, as catalogued by the Department of Magical Artifacts, are relatively rare, but not extraordinarily so. Most are created by applying disillusionment charms to fabric typically demiguise hair woven with silver thread and treated with a complex potion whose recipe is closely guarded by the few wand makers who specialize in their creation. These cloaks provide effective concealment, but suffer from significant limitations. The charms fade over time, requiring regular maintenance. They can be detected by certain revealing spells, and they often develop a grayish opacity with age, rendering them increasingly less effective. What sets the cloak that came into Harry Potter's possession apart from these conventional magical items is not merely its superior craftsmanship, but its seemingly impossible properties. Unlike standard invisibility cloaks, this one has remained perfectly effective for centuries without maintenance or restoration. It renders its wearer completely undetectable, even to magical means of perception. Most remarkably, it shows no signs of aging or deterioration despite continuous use across generations. To understand the true significance of this extraordinary artifact, we must delve into one of the wizarding world's most enduring legends, the tale of the 3 brothers, as preserved in the tales of Beedle the Bard. While most wizarding children encounter this story as a simple fable warning against the dangers of attempting to cheat death, certain magical historians have long suspected it contains elements of historical truth. The tale recounts how 3 wizard brothers Tot, Antioch, Cadmus, and Ignatus Peverell encountered death personified after conjuring a bridge to cross a treacherous river. Impressed by their magical skill, Death offered each brother a prize for evading him. The eldest brother, Antioch, requested an unbeatable wand. The middle brother, Cadmus, asked for a stone that could recall the dead. And the youngest brother, Ignotus, wary of Death's intentions, requested something that would allow him to leave without being followed by Death's end, invisibility cloak of perfect and permanent concealment. While the story presents these items to collectively known as the Deathly Hallows Tea as being created by Death himself, magical historians suggest a more plausible explanation. The Peverell brothers were extraordinarily gifted wand makers and magical artificers who created these items through advanced magic beyond the capabilities of their contemporaries. Medieval wizarding records confirm the historical existence of 3 brothers with the surname Peverell who lived in the West Country of England during the 13th century. Archaeological evidence from wizarding burial sites of the period includes a tombstone marked with the symbol later associated with the Deathly Hallows II, a vertical line representing the Elder Wand, enclosed within a circle symbolizing the Resurrection Stone, both contained within a triangle representing the Invisibility Cloak. The youngest brother, Ignatus Peverell, is of particular interest to our story. Historical records describe him as a reclusive but brilliant magical researcher with a particular interest in concealment charms. Unlike his more flamboyant elder brothers, Ignotus lived to an advanced age and died, as the tale suggests, greeting death as an old friend, likely a poetic reference to his peaceful acceptance of mortality after a full life. What sets Ignotus's cloak apart from all other invisibility cloaks lies in its fundamental nature. While standard cloaks rely on charms and enchantments applied to material, magical researchers who have studied the Peverell cloak too, albeit briefly and under strict limitations, suggest it may represent a fundamentally different approach to invisibility. Rather than bending light around the wearer or creating an illusion of absence, the cloak appears to partially shift its wearer into a different phase of reality, making them truly imperceptible rather than merely unseen. The method by which Ignotus Peverell achieved this remarkable feat remains one of Wandlore's greatest mysteries. Some magical theorists propose that the cloak contains strands of the straw hair, the only magical substance that, like the cloak itself, exists simultaneously in the realm of the living and the realm of death. Others suggest that the fabric itself may have been woven on a loom, enchanted with ancient magic now lost to time. Whatever the method of its creation, the result was an artifact of unprecedented power and durability. After Ignotus Peverell's death, the cloak passed to his son, beginning a tradition that would continue for nearly 7 centuries. Unlike the other Hallows, which changed hands through violence and treachery, the invisibility cloak was carefully preserved as a family heirloom, passed from parent to child with each new generation. This orderly succession suggests the Peverell descendants understood the cloak's true significance and the importance of keeping it from those who might misuse its power. The direct male line of the Peverell family eventually ended, but the cloak continued its journey through the female line, eventually coming into the possession of the Potter family when Iolantha Peverell married Hardwin Potter in the 12th century. The Potters, a respected but not particularly prominent wizarding family at the time, maintained the tradition of secrecy surrounding the cloak. Rather than flaunting their possession of a legendary artifact, they presented it simply as an unusually effective family heirloom. Throughout the centuries, the cloak served successive generations of Potters in various capacities. During the International Statute of Secrecy implementation in the late 17th century, Ralston Potter reportedly used the cloak to attend Muggle parliamentary meetings undetected, gathering crucial information that helped shape wizarding policy during this turbulent period. During the Goblin rebellions of the 18th century, Charles Potter employed the cloak to smuggle Goblin refugees to safety, earning the rare respect of the Goblin nation. By the 20th century, knowledge of the cloak's connection to the Deathly Hallows had faded even within the Potter family. James Potter, the last adult owner before Harry, appears to have regarded it simply as an extraordinary invisibility cloak of unknown origin, perfect for youthful adventures at Hogwarts with his fellow Marauders. This lack of awareness regarding the cloak's true significance may have been deliberate on the part of earlier generations, a way of protecting future Potters from those who might seek the Hallows. The cloak's journey took a significant turn when James Potter entrusted it to Albus Dumbledore shortly before James and Lily Potter were killed by Lord Voldemort. Dumbledore, who had spent decades researching the Deathly Hallows, immediately recognized the cloak for what it truly was. In his own words, he had given up hope of finding it, of finding any of the Hallows, yet suddenly one had come into his possession through sheer coincidence. After James and Lily's deaths, Dumbledore made the momentous decision to pass the cloak to Harry Potter on Christmas of his first year at Hogwarts. This anonymous gift, too, accompanied only by the cryptic note, "Your father left this in my possession before he died. It is time it was returned to you. Use it well." Would prove crucial throughout Harry's school years and beyond. The cloak's role in Harry Potter's adventures cannot be overstated. It enabled his nighttime explorations of Hogwarts, his discovery of the Mirror of Erised, his visits to Hagrid after curfew, and countless other moments both trivial and profound. More significantly, it provided critical protection during the most dangerous periods of his conflict with Lord Voldemort, including the final battle at Hogwarts. What Harry didn't realize until near the end of the Second Wizarding War was that his familiar invisibility cloak was in fact one of the 3 legendary Deathly Hallows. This revelation came through a complex series of discoveries involving Xenophilius Lovegood's explanation of the Hallows, Hermione Granger's translation of the tales of Beedle the Bard, and eventually Albus Dumbledore's posthumous confirmations. The magical properties of the invisibility cloak are worth examining in detail, as they demonstrate why this artifact stands apart from all others of its kind. Standard invisibility cloaks can be penetrated by certain detection spells, including Hominum Revelio, which reveals human presence regardless of concealment. The Peveril cloak, however, provides perfect invisibility that cannot be counteracted by any known spell. Even the enchanted Marauders map, which could detect people under conventional invisibility cloaks, only worked with Harry's cloak because the map's creators had specifically incorporated his particular cloak into their magic through personal experience with it. Most invisibility cloaks are vulnerable to physical disturbance. A footprint in dust or the displacement of objects can reveal the presence of an invisible person. The Peveril cloak seems to mitigate even these physical tells to some degree, though not completely, suggesting it affects physical reality beyond mere visual concealment. Perhaps most significantly, the cloak proves impervious to summoning charms and other magical attempts to remove it from its wearer. This property saved Harry Potter on multiple occasions, most notably during the confrontation at Malfoy Manor, when Draco Malfoy's attempt to summon the cloak from Harry failed completely. The true wonder of the invisibility cloak lies not merely in its perfect function but in what it represents philosophically. Unlike the Elder Wand, which symbolizes unbeatable power, or the Resurrection Stone, which represents control over death itself, the cloak embodies a more subtle and profound magic stuff. The ability to move through the world undetected, to observe without influencing, to exist temporarily outside the normal constraints of human interaction. This philosophical dimension aligns with the character of Ignatus Peveril, as portrayed in the tale of the three brothers. Unlike his brothers, who sought to conquer and control, Ignatus desired only to live his natural life without interference and to pass peacefully when his time came. The cloak represents not dominance over others, but freedom from their dominance, a fundamentally different relationship with power. In the years following the Second Wizarding War, Harry Potter has presumably maintained possession of the invisibility cloak, continuing its remarkably consistent lineage. Whether he understands the full significance of this artifact, not merely as one of the Deathly Hallows, but as perhaps the single most perfect magical object ever created, remains unknown. Given his character, it seems likely that, like Ignatus Peveril himself, Harry values the cloak not for the power it represents, but for the connection it provides to his family and his heritage. As we conclude our exploration of this remarkable magical artifact, the shadows in our room seem deeper, the silence more complete. Perhaps you find yourself wondering, as I do, what it would feel like to wrap such a cloak around your shoulders and step out into the night, truly unseen. What would you observe when no one knew you were watching? What truths might be revealed to you? And could you, like Ignatus Peveril, use such power with wisdom rather than being corrupted by the freedom it provides? Chapter 7. The Division Between the Founders. Unity forged in common purpose can sometimes fracture along the fault lines of deeply held beliefs. As the fire burns steadily in our hearth this evening, casting long shadows across ancient tomes and weathered parchments, let us explore one of the most consequential schisms in magical history. The division that arose between the four brilliant witches and wizards who created Hogwarts' School of Witchcraft and Wizardry. In the early days of Hogwarts, more than 1,000 years ago, the friendship and shared vision of Godric Gryffindor, Helga Hufflepuff, Rowena Ravenclaw, and Salazar Slytherin gave rise to what would become the greatest institution of magical learning in Britain. Their initial harmony seems almost miraculous in retrospect, given their markedly different temperaments and values. Yet historical records suggest that for several years, these four extraordinary individuals worked together in remarkable concert, united by the revolutionary idea that young witches and wizards deserved structured education in a safe environment. Imagine, if you will, the world into which Hogwarts was born, The late 10th century was a time of profound superstition and fear among Muggle communities. Witch hunts were becoming increasingly common, forcing magical families into hiding and isolation. Self-taught magic was dangerous and unpredictable, leading to frequent accidents and occasionally catastrophic magical outbursts. In this climate of fear and fractured magical knowledge, the founder's vision of a centralized school was truly revolutionary. The early years of Hogwarts were characterized by a spirit of innovation and collaboration that transcended the founder's individual differences. Gryffindor's bold experimental approach to magic complemented Ravenclaw's methodical scholarship. Hufflepuff's emphasis on inclusive education balanced Slytherin's focus on ambition and magical heritage. Together, they created a curriculum that would form the foundation of British magical education for centuries to come. Ancient scrolls preserved in the Hogwarts library suggest the four founders personally taught all subjects in the beginning, with each gradually specializing in their areas of particular expertise. Gryffindor focused on transfiguration and magical combat, Ravenclaw on charms and astronomical magic, Hufflepuff on herbology and healing arts, and Slytherin on potions and what would later be termed the subtle arts. The integration of these diverse magical disciplines created a comprehensive educational approach previously unknown in the wizarding world. But beneath this productive partnership lay fundamental philosophical differences that would eventually surface, particularly regarding who should be permitted to study at Hogwarts. The question of whether Muggle-born children should be admitted to the school became the catalyst for what wizarding historians call the Great Founders' Schism. Salazar Slytherin's position on this matter was shaped by his personal experiences. Historical accounts describe him as having witnessed firsthand the persecution of wizard-kind by frightened Muggles. Some sources suggest he had lost family members to witch hunters, though these accounts are difficult to verify with certainty. What is clear is that Slytherin harbored a deep distrust of Muggle-born students, fearing they might intentionally or inadvertently expose the school to those who would destroy it. This mistrust was not entirely irrational in its historical context. The statute of secrecy was still centuries away, and magical communities had few protections beyond their own vigilance. Muggle-born children of this era often came from families deeply entrenched in religious beliefs that demonized magic. Slytherin argued that such students presented an existential threat to both the school and its pupils. Godric Gryffindor stood in direct opposition to this view. Contemporary accounts describe him as believing fervently in judging individuals by their actions rather than their birth, a revolutionary concept for his time. Gryffindor maintained that magical ability itself was proof of a person's right to education, regardless of their parentage. More pragmatically, he argued that untrained Muggle-born witches and wizards posed a greater danger to secrecy than those properly educated in controlling their abilities. Helga Hufflepuff aligned with Gryffindor in this dispute, but approached it from a different perspective. Historical evidence suggests she viewed education as a universal right for any child with magical ability. The famous quote attributed to her cits, "I'll take the lot and treat them all the same." Cits reflects her egalitarian philosophy. For Hufflepuff, the school's purpose was not merely to produce powerful witches and wizards, but to nurture every magical child to their full potential. Rowena Ravenclaw's position in this conflict appears more nuanced. Primary sources indicate she recognized the legitimate security concerns raised by Slytherin while also appreciating the intellectual and magical contributions that came from diverse backgrounds. Her proposed solution involved developing more sophisticated protective enchantments for the castle and creating magical screening methods to identify potential students whose families might pose a risk to the school's security. Solutions that addressed Slytherin's concerns without excluding students based solely on birth. The disagreement festered over years, gradually transforming from philosophical debate to personal animosity, particularly between Gryffindor and Slytherin. Ancient accounts describe heated arguments echoing through the castle halls, frosty silences during feast days, and increasingly separate teaching methods. What had begun as a unified educational vision began to fracture along ideological lines. The precise sequence of events that led to the final breach remains somewhat obscured by time, with various historical sources offering conflicting accounts. The most widely accepted version suggests that matters came to a head during a school governor's meeting, where Slytherin made a final demand that Muggle-born students be banned from admission. When this proposal was rejected by the other three founders, a confrontation ensued between Slytherin and Gryffindor. Some historical texts describe a magical duel between the two great wizards, though scholars debate whether this was an actual battle or a metaphorical description of their ideological conflict. What is certain is that following this confrontation, Salazar Slytherin left Hogwarts, never to return during his lifetime. Before his departure, however, Slytherin left behind a terrible legacy that would haunt the school for centuries, the Chamber of Secrets. Created in secret and hidden so well that even the other founders could not discover it, the chamber contained a monstrous basilisk, placed there by Slytherin to one day purge the school of those he deemed unworthy to study magic. This final act represented the complete breakdown of trust between Slytherin and his former friends and colleagues. The remaining three founders continued their work at Hogwarts, adapting to Slytherin's absence but never fully healing from the breach. Historical evidence suggests they maintained the house system that bears their names, perhaps hoping that Slytherin would eventually return and that the four houses would once again represent a unified whole. That reunion never occurred in their lifetimes. The founders' division had immediate practical consequences for early Hogwarts. Teaching responsibilities had to be redistributed, curriculum adjusted, and new professors eventually hired to replace Slytherin's expertise. But the long-term effects proved far more significant and enduring. The house system, originally designed to create balanced communities that reflected different but complementary approaches to magic, instead became institutionalized divisions that perpetuated the founders' philosophical differences. Slytherin House, in particular, inherited its founders' emphasis on blood purity, though historical records indicate this aspect waxed and waned through different eras. The rivalry between Gryffindor and Slytherin houses directly mirrored the broken friendship between their namesakes, becoming so ingrained in school culture that even centuries later, students often inherited these ancient animosities upon sorting. What began as a personal conflict between two great wizards evolved into a structural feature of Hogwarts itself, shaping countless generations of young witches and wizards. Perhaps most significantly, the ideological dispute over blood status within the wizarding world never truly disappeared. Though the other three founders prevailed in keeping Hogwarts open to all magical children regardless of parentage, Slytherin's views found receptive audiences throughout wizarding history. The pure blood movement that would eventually give rise to figures like Grindelwald and Voldemort can trace its philosophical roots directly to Salazar Slytherin's position in this ancient conflict. Yet we must be careful not to oversimplify this historical division. Modern scholarship suggests Slytherin was not merely a one-dimensional villain, but a complex figure shaped by his times and experiences. His emphasis on cunning, ambition, and self-preservation reflected genuine values, even if his views on blood purity were ultimately harmful. Similarly, the other founders had their own blindnesses and limitations, said Gryffindor's recklessness, Ravenclaw's intellectual elitism, and Hufflepuff's perhaps naive inclusivity, all represented imperfect responses to the challenges of their era. What makes the founders' division so historically significant is not just that it occurred, but that it became institutionalized within Hogwarts itself. When the founders created the Sorting Hat to carry on their work after their deaths, they inadvertently ensured that their disagreement would be perpetuated through centuries. Each new generation of students would be categorized according to values that reflected the founders' divided vision, making reconciliation increasingly difficult. The physical layout of Hogwarts itself came to embody this division. The Slytherin dungeons, separated from the rest of the house common rooms, architecturally reinforced the isolation of Slytherin values from the broader school community. The distance between Gryffindor Tower and the Slytherin dungeons seemed one reaching toward the sky, the other delving beneath the Lake T symbolized how far apart the Founders' paths had diverged. In the centuries following the Founders' era, various headmasters and headmistresses attempted to bridge these divisions with varying degrees of success. Historical records mention Headmistress Follidaspor's 14th-century Common Tables initiative, which temporarily abolished house tables in the Great Hall, and Headmaster Everard's 17th-century introduction of inter-house academic competitions designed to foster cooperation alongside rivalry. But these efforts, while well-intentioned, never fully resolved the structural divisions embedded in the school's very design. The legacy of the Founders' Division reached its most destructive expression during the Second Wizarding War, when Hogwarts itself became a battleground between ideologies that could be traced directly back to the original schism. Lord Voldemort, as the self-proclaimed heir of Slytherin, represented the most extreme manifestation of Salazar's beliefs about blood purity. The battle fought at Hogwarts was, in many ways, the final resolution of a conflict that began 1,000 years earlier between the school's founders. Yet from this darkest chapter emerged hopeful signs of healing. The aftermath of the Battle of Hogwarts saw significant reforms under Headmistress Minerva McGonagall, including efforts to reduce house rivalries and promote unified school identity. Perhaps most symbolically, Slytherin students who chose to stay and fight for Hogwarts demonstrated that house affiliation need not determine ideology. Instead, that ambition and cunning could serve noble ends as well as selfish ones. In modern times, wizarding historians have begun to approach the Founders' Division with greater nuance, recognizing how cultural context shaped their perspectives. The pure-blood ideology that found its earliest expression in Slytherin's views has been largely discredited in contemporary wizarding society, though pockets of such thinking persist. More importantly, there is growing recognition that the other Founders' values courage, wisdom, and loyalty are incomplete without the ambition and cunning that Slytherin prized. As we reflect on this ancient schism by our evening fire, perhaps we can see in it a cautionary tale about how even the greatest witches and wizards can be blinded by their own experiences and prejudices. The Founders built something magnificent in Hogwarts, an institution that has endured for a millennium, yet they could not overcome their own differences to preserve their friendship and unified vision. And so we might ask ourselves, what divisions in our own magical communities might future generations look back upon with similar regret? What courage might be required to reach across ancient rivalries and find common purpose once again? And how might we honor the best of the Founders' legacy while learning from their greatest failure, the inability to resolve their differences for the greater good of the magical world they all sought to protect? Chapter 8. The Trials of Sirius Black. Some lives are defined by a single choice, a moment when fate and free will collide to set a soul upon an unexpected path. As our evening grows deeper, and the sound of distant thunder murmurs beyond our windows, let us unravel the complex tapestry of one such life, that of Sirius Black, whose journey from privileged heir to notorious prisoner to vindicated hero embodies both the darkest shadows and brightest lights of the wizarding world. Sirius Black was born in 1959 into perhaps the most notorious pure-blood family in wizarding Britain. The noble and most ancient House of Black traced its lineage back centuries and prided itself on magical purity above all else. Their family motto, toujours pur tu, always pure tude, reflected their unwavering commitment to pure-blood ideology and their disdain for those they considered lesser by birth. The ancestral home at number 12, Grimmauld Place, embodied the Black family's values as surely as its residents. Dark artifacts lined glass cabinets, house elf heads adorned the stairway, and portraits of stern-faced ancestors looked down with perpetual disapproval. It was in this atmosphere of aristocratic darkness that young Sirius spent his formative years, alongside his younger brother Regulus, and under the watchful eyes of his parents, Orion and Walburga Black. From his earliest childhood, Sirius displayed an independent streak that set him apart from previous generations of Blacks. Family records and later personal accounts suggest he questioned the pure-blood rhetoric that formed the foundation of his family's worldview, much to the growing concern of his parents. This nascent rebellion might have been quashed in time, as it had been with other independent-minded Black children before him, had it not been for the pivotal moment of his Hogwarts sorting. When 11-year-old Sirius arrived at Hogwarts in 1970, the Black family expected him to follow tradition by joining Slytherin House, where virtually every Black had been sorted for generations. Instead, the sorting hat placed him in Gryffindor, set a decision that sent shockwaves through pure-blood society and represented the first truly irrevocable break between Sirius and his family legacy. This sorting proved more than a symbolic rebellion. It placed Sirius in direct daily contact with perspectives that contradicted everything his family had taught him. In Gryffindor Tower, he formed friendships with students his family would have considered blood traitors, and beneath their station Sep, most significantly, with James Potter, a pure-blood who rejected blood supremacist ideology entirely. The friendship between Sirius Black and James Potter would become the defining relationship of Sirius's life, more meaningful to him than any family bond. Contemporary accounts describe them as more like brothers than friends, united not by blood, but by shared values and a similar irreverent approach to life. Together with Remus Lupin and Peter Pettigrew, they formed the tight-knit group known as the Marauders, whose adventures and mischief-making became legendary within Hogwarts. For Sirius, these friendships represented an alternative family structure based on choice rather than birth-thust, a radical concept for someone raised in the tradition-bound Black household. This chosen family became increasingly important as relations with his biological family deteriorated throughout his school years. By his mid-teens, Sirius had fully rejected his family's ideology. He decorated his bedroom at Grimmauld Place with Gryffindor banners and Muggle motorcycling posters, deliberately provoking his parents' rage. Family records indicate increasingly heated confrontations between Sirius and his parents, particularly his mother Walburga, whose volatile temper was legendary even among pure-blood circles. The final break came when Sirius was 16. Following a particularly vicious argument whose exact content remains unknown, he left Grimmauld Place forever, seeking refuge with the Potter family. Fleeing one's family was no small matter in pure-blood society, where family loyalty was considered paramount. Sirius's departure represented not merely teenage rebellion, but a complete repudiation of centuries of Black family values and connections. The Potters welcomed Sirius as a second son, providing him not only with shelter, but with a model of family life based on warmth and acceptance, rather than rigid hierarchy and prejudice. Fleamont and Euphemia Potter, already elderly when they took Sirius in, treated him with a parental affection he had never experienced from his biological parents. This period appears to have been healing for Sirius, allowing him to experience family life without the toxicity that had characterized his childhood home. Shortly after Sirius's departure, his mother blasted his name from the family tapestry send, the formal acknowledgement of disownment in Black family tradition. His younger brother Regulus, always more obedient to family expectations, was positioned as the new heir. Family correspondence from this period reveals Walburga's bitter pronouncements that she no longer had an elder son. Despite being cut off financially from his substantial expected inheritance, Sirius managed well enough. Upon coming of age, he received a generous bequest from his uncle Alphard II, who was subsequently also removed from the family tapestry for supporting the disowned heir. This financial independence enabled Sirius to establish himself separately from both his family and his chosen Potter refuge as he completed his education at Hogwarts. Following graduation in 1978, Sirius and his friends entered a wizarding world increasingly shadowed by Lord Voldemort's first rise to power. The ideological battle that had played out in microcosm within the Black family was now engulfing the entire wizarding community. For Sirius, there was never any question about which side he would choose. He and his friends joined the Order of the Phoenix, the resistance organization led by Albus Dumbledore that stood in direct opposition to Voldemort and his Death Eaters. This choice placed Sirius in direct conflict with several members of his own family. His cousin Bellatrix Lestrange had become one of Voldemort's most devoted followers, while his brother Regulus had taken the Dark Mark shortly after leaving Hogwarts. Family had become not merely estranged but enemy, a reality that added personal pain to the already deadly serious work of the Order. During these dangerous years, Sirius distinguished himself as a capable fighter and loyal Order member. Fellow Order members from this period describe him as recklessly brave, quick with both wand and wit, and utterly dedicated to the cause. He participated in several direct confrontations with Death Eaters, including a notable duel with his cousin Bellatrix that ended in stalemate tea, a testament to his magical skill, as Bellatrix was renowned as one of Voldemort's most dangerous lieutenants. What Sirius didn't know during this period was that his brother Regulus had experienced a profound change of heart regarding his Death Eater allegiance. Discovering some of the Dark Lord's most terrible secrets and horrified by his methods, Regulus had attempted to undermine Voldemort by stealing and planning to destroy one of his Horcruxes. This act of defiance cost Regulus his life in 1979, though the full story would remain unknown to Sirius for many years. This tragic twist that his brother had ultimately chosen the right path without Sirius ever knowing would later become one of the great unresolved sorrows of his life. As the war intensified, tragedy struck closer to home. James and Lily Potter, now married and parents to young Harry, became specific targets of Lord Voldemort due to a prophecy concerning their son. In response, they went into hiding under the protection of the Fidelius Charm, a complex piece of magic that conceals a secret within a single living soul, known as the Secret Keeper. Here occurs the pivotal moment that would alter the course of Sirius Black's life forever. Originally planned as the Potter's secret keeper, Sirius suggested a last-minute change to Peter Pettigrew, reasoning that he himself would be the obvious choice, and therefore the obvious target, while the less prominent Pettigrew would be overlooked. This suggestion, made with the best of protective intentions, would prove catastrophically misguided. Unknown to Sirius or the other Marauders, Pettigrew had already turned traitor, providing information to Voldemort for approximately a year before being made secret keeper. Within days of the charm being cast, Pettigrew betrayed the Potter's location to Voldemort, leading directly to James and Lily's murders on October 31st, 1981. When Sirius discovered the Potter's deaths and realized Pettigrew's betrayal, he pursued his former friend with single-minded fury. Cornering Pettigrew on a Muggle street, Sirius intended to exact revenge for the deaths of those who had become his true family. But Pettigrew, proving more cunning than anyone had given him credit for, when shouted for all to hear that Sirius had betrayed the Potters, used a blasting curse that killed 12 Muggle bystanders, cut off his own finger, and transformed into his rat, an Amogus form to escape into the sewers. The scene left behind appeared damning. 13 bodies, a finger, and Sirius Black standing in the middle, wand drawn. When Ministry officials arrived, they found Sirius laughing, not from humor, but from the hysterical realization of how completely Pettigrew had outmaneuvered him. This apparent madness, combined with the testimonies of Muggle witnesses who had heard Pettigrew's accusation, sealed his fate. In the chaos following Voldemort's apparent defeat, normal judicial procedures were often abbreviated or skipped entirely. Sirius Black, already presumed guilty by most of the wizarding world, was sent directly to Azkaban without a trial, one of the greatest miscarriages of justice in modern magical history. The man who had rebelled against his dark family legacy now found himself branded as the darkest of traitors, believed to have betrayed his closest friends to the very evil he had fought against. The 12 years Sirius spent in Azkaban represent perhaps the most profound trial of his life. Azkaban, guarded by dementors that feed on human happiness, strips prisoners of every positive emotion and memory, leaving only despair and the worst experiences of their lives. Most inmates lose their sanity within months. That Sirius maintained his mental faculties throughout his imprisonment speaks to extraordinary psychological resilience. By his own later account, Sirius survived through a combination of factors. His knowledge of his own innocence, while painful, provided a truth that the Dementors couldn't take from him because it wasn't a happy thought. Additionally, his ability to transform into his dog, Animagus form, offered limited protection, as Dementors primarily affect human minds and emotions. In his canine form, his feelings were simplified, less vulnerable to the Dementors' influence. Perhaps most importantly, Sirius maintained his sanity through his obsessive focus on Peter Pettigrew's betrayal and the harm done to Harry Potter Sut, a focus that eventually transformed from helpless rage to determination when he recognized Pettigrew in rat form in a newspaper photograph with the Weasley family. This discovery gave him purpose and hope, emotions so unexpected in Azkaban that they slipped past the Dementors' perception. His escape from Azkaban in 1993 theft, the first successful breakout in the prison's history, demonstrated both his determination and ingenuity. Taking advantage of his emaciated state to slip through the bars as a dog and swim to the mainland, Sirius accomplished what was widely considered impossible, driven by the dual purposes of protecting Harry from Pettigrew and claiming the revenge that had been denied him 12 years earlier. The events that followed his escape reveal the complexity of Sirius's character in this damaged stage of his life. His single-minded pursuit of Pettigrew bordered on obsession, at times clouding his judgment. Yet when finally confronted with the opportunity to kill his betrayer in the Shrieking Shack, Sirius proved capable of restraint when Harry intervened, showing that beneath the Azkaban-hardened exterior remained the man who had once chosen justice over his family's darker inclinations. The brief moment of vindication when Remus Lupin and Harry Potter recognized his innocence must have been profoundly healing for Sirius, even though Pettigrew's subsequent escape meant he couldn't be publicly exonerated. After 13 years of being universally reviled for a crime he didn't commit, being believed by those whose opinions truly mattered to him represented a kind of emotional homecoming, even as he remained a fugitive in the eyes of the wizarding world. The final chapter of Sirius's life was marked by confinement of a different sort. Having offered his family home at Grimmauld Place as headquarters for the reconstituted Order of the Phoenix, Sirius found himself unable to leave its walls due to his status as a wanted criminal. The supreme irony of being trapped in the very house he had fled as a teenager was not lost on him, and this forced inactivity affected his mental state significantly. Those who knew him during this period describe a Sirius caught between his youthful impulsiveness and the trauma of his Azkaban years. His recklessness had survived intact, but now came coupled with dark moods and a bitter edge that hadn't been present in his youth. He struggled with his role as godfather to Harry, sometimes confusing the boy with memories of his father James Sist, a confusion that reflected Sirius's interrupted emotional development during his imprisonment. His final battle at the Department of Mysteries in June 1996 reflected both his finest qualities and his deepest flaws. The speed with which he responded to the news of Harry being in danger demonstrated his unwavering loyalty and protective instinct toward his godson. Yet his approach to the battle itself showed traces of the recklessness that had characterized his youth, now made more dangerous by years of forced inactivity and the emotional weight of being back in direct conflict with his cousin Bellatrix. Sirius's death at Bellatrix's hand, falling through the veil in the death chamber, provided no opportunity for final words or proper goodbyes. This abrupt ending seems tragically fitting for a life characterized by sudden reversals and unresolved relationships. Having finally escaped the prison of Azkaban, only to find himself trapped in the prison of Grimmauld Place, he died in a moment of action and purpose, protecting the son of his chosen brother. The legacy of Sirius Black is one of both warning and inspiration. His life cautions against the dangers of impulsivity and the high cost of seeking revenge. Yet it also demonstrates the power of choosing one's own path rather than following an inherited one, of defining family through love rather than blood, and of maintaining core principles even at great personal cost. In the genealogy of the House of Black, Sirius represents a singular divergence side, the heir who rejected his inheritance and chose a different legacy. From that first sorting into Gryffindor to his final battle alongside the Order of the Phoenix, Sirius consistently chose the difficult path of resistance against the easy path of conformity. That his life was marked by tragedy does not diminish the fundamental courage of these choices. As our candles burn low, and the story of this complex man draws to its close, we might reflect on the nature of family legacy and personal choice. How do we navigate between the identities we inherit and those we create for ourselves? When our principles come into conflict with our connections, how do we determine where our true loyalty should lie? And in a world that is rarely simple enough to divide into purely good or evil, how might we maintain our core values while acknowledging the complicated humanity of even those with whom we most deeply disagree? Chapter 9. The Subtlety of Potions Brewing. Steam spirals upward from a gently simmering cauldron, its vapors carrying scents of herbs, minerals, and more exotic substances as they twist and disperse into the cool dungeon air. As our evening continues, and the outside world grows quiet, let us turn our attention to one of the most intricate and nuanced branches of magic tist, the ancient art of potion making, where precision and intuition blend as surely as the ingredients in a master brewer's cauldron. Potions, unlike many other forms of magic, require no wand movements or incantations. Yet this absence of obvious magical gestures belies the deep magical principles that govern successful brewing. As Severus Snape once told his first-year students, potion-making offers the power to bottle fame, brew glory, and even stopper death. But only for those who understand the subtle science behind the bubbling cauldrons and shimmering vapors. The origins of potion-making predate formal wizarding education by millennia. Archaeological evidence suggests that magical brewing existed in ancient Mesopotamia, Egypt, China, and among indigenous communities across every continent. These early potion makers worked primarily through observation and tradition, developing recipes through generations of careful experimentation and refinement. Their discoveries range from simple healing tonics to complex mind-affecting elixirs to form the foundation upon which modern potion-making still rests. The fundamental principles of potion-making combine elements of both science and art in a way few other magical disciplines do. At its most basic level, brewing requires understanding the magical properties of ingredients and how they interact when combined under specific conditions. Yet, beyond these technical requirements, lies a realm where intuition, timing, and the brewer's own magical essence influence the final result. Consider the physical components that form the foundation of any potion. Each ingredient brings not only its material properties, but its magical essence to the cauldron. Flobberworm mucus provides excellent thickening properties while magically binding volatile ingredients. Valerian root contains natural sedative compounds, but also carries magical properties that calm not just the body but the spirit. Understanding these dual natures, said physical and magical set, is essential for any potioneer. The preparation of ingredients further demonstrates the blend of technical skill and magical awareness required. Many recipes specify not merely what to add, but precisely how ingredients should be prepared, whether herbs should be crushed or chopped, whether beetle eyes should be ground clockwise or counterclockwise, whether salamander blood should be drawn from a living specimen or harvested posthumously. These distinctions might seem arbitrary to the novice, but experienced potioneers recognize how each preparation method releases or preserves specific magical properties. Timing represents another critical element in successful brewing. The precise moment when an ingredient should be added, how long a mixture should simmer before the next step, even the phase of the moon during certain brewing processes can significantly affect a potion's efficacy. Some particularly complex potions such as Polyjuice or Felix Felicis require brewing cycles that span weeks or months, with specific steps that must be performed at precise intervals. The cauldron itself contributes to the magical process in ways often overlooked by students. Different metals interact with magical ingredients in distinct ways. Pewter provides stability for beginners. Brass conducts magical energy more efficiently for intermediate brews, while copper and silver offer superior properties for the most advanced potions. The thickness of the cauldron bottom affects heat distribution, which in turn influences how ingredients release their magical essences, explaining why Percy Weasley's report on cauldron bottom thickness standards, though tedious to some, addressed a genuinely important safety concern. Heat sources for potion making vary widely across wizarding cultures. European traditions favor controlled flames, modulated carefully throughout the brewing process. East Asian potion masters often use specific woods or charcoals chosen to complement the potion being brewed. Magical communities in volcanic regions sometimes harness geothermal energy, while Arctic wizards have developed techniques using crystallized magical ice that paradoxically provides controlled heat. Each approach influences the subtle magical field surrounding the cauldron, affecting how ingredients interact. The environment in which brewing occurs further influences potion efficacy. This explains why potions classrooms are typically located in dungeons. The stable temperature, minimal air currents, and natural dampness provide optimal conditions for most European brewing traditions. However, different potions may benefit from specific environments, to moonlight potions brewed outdoors, under direct lunar rays, jungle remedies that require high humidity, or mountain elixirs that incorporate thin air into their magical properties. Beyond these technical considerations lies the more elusive aspect of potion making, the brewer's own influence on the process. Unlike charm casting or transfiguration, where the wizard's magic flows directly through their wand, potion making involves a subtler magical connection. The brewer's magical essence permeates the brewing space, interacting with ingredients and influencing reactions in ways that magical researchers are still working to fully understand. This personal element helps explain why identical techniques and ingredients can produce different results when employed by different brewers. A potion made by a master like Horace Slughorn typically shows greater efficacy than the same potion made by a competent but less gifted brewer, even when following identical procedures. This difference has less to do with technical skill than with the master's deeper magical attunement to the brewing process. The magical theory behind this phenomenon suggests that experienced potioneers develop an unconscious magical resonance with their ingredients over years of practice. This resonance allows them to make minute adjustments, tests an extra stir here, slightly more heat there, guided not by conscious decision, but by an intuitive sense of what the potion needs. Severus Snape's handwritten modifications to standard potions in his copy of Advanced Potion Making demonstrate this intuitive mastery, as his adjustments consistently improved upon the original recipes without formal experimentation. This intuitive aspect makes potion making particularly challenging to teach. While a professor can demonstrate proper technique and explain theoretical principles, developing the subtle awareness that distinguishes great potioneers from merely competent ones requires personal experience and inherent sensitivity. Some witches and wizards seem naturally attuned to the subtle magical currents of brewing, while others may spend years developing this awareness through dedicated practice. The distinction between talent and technical skill appears clearly when comparing different approaches to potion education. Severus Snape, despite his harsh teaching methods, was recognized as having extraordinary brewing talent, an innate understanding of how ingredients interacted and how standard recipes could be improved. His modified instructions often bypassed traditional explanations in favor of direct insights that worked better but required intuitive understanding to apply successfully. By contrast, Horace Slughorn's teaching emphasized technical mastery first, with the development of intuition as a secondary goal. His methodical approach made him more accessible to average students, but perhaps less likely to inspire the highest levels of brewing innovation. Both approaches produced skilled potioneers, but they developed different strengths in their students. The history of potion making reveals a fascinating tension between tradition and innovation. Many standard recipes have remained essentially unchanged for centuries, perfected through generations of careful refinement. The basic cure for boils taught to first years at Hogwarts follows a formula documented in the 14th century, while the Draught of Living Death appears in nearly identical form in brewing manuals dating to the early medieval period. Yet alongside this conservatism runs a current of continuous innovation. Damocles' invention of the wolfsbane potion in the late 20th century revolutionized life for those afflicted with lycanthropy. Zygmunt Budge's development of the Draught of Living Death variation featuring powdered root of asphodel rather than the traditional chopped form dramatically improved its potency. Felix Felicis, though ancient in concept, has been repeatedly refined, with the modern version credited to Zygmunt Budge showing greater stability and fewer side effects than earlier formulations. This balance between respecting established knowledge and pursuing improvement reflects the dualistic nature of the discipline itself, part precise science, part creative art. The most renowned potion makers throughout history have typically mastered both aspects, combining meticulous attention to detail with inspired innovation. The dangers inherent in potion making further highlight the importance of this balanced approach. Unlike a failed charm, which typically produces no effect, a poorly made potion can generate consequences ranging from embarrassing to lethal. Cauldron explosions, toxic fumes, and unexpected transformations await the careless or overconfident brewer. These risks explain the strict safety protocols observed in properly run potions classrooms and professional brewing facilities. Some potions present particular dangers, not just in their brewing but in their effects. Love potions, despite their seemingly harmless name, essentially remove the drinker's free will regarding romantic attachments to raising serious ethical concerns about consent and autonomy. Polyjuice potion enables impersonation with troubling implications for security and identity. Felix Felicis, when taken excessively, produces dangerous overconfidence and reckless behavior. These examples illustrate why potions, perhaps more than any other magical discipline, are subject to strict regulation by magical governing bodies worldwide. The ethics of potion use extend beyond obvious dangers to subtler questions about enhancement and dependency. Performance-enhancing potions are generally banned in competitive magical contexts, from Quidditch to academic examinations. Potions that alter mood or perception raise concerns about psychological dependency. Even healing potions, universally recognized as beneficial, present ethical dilemmas when considering questions of accessibility and fairness in their distribution. Ancient potions texts often included ethical guidelines alongside brewing instructions, recognizing that the power to heal or harm through potions carries significant responsibility. Modern potioneers continue this tradition through professional codes of conduct that govern brewing practices and appropriate use of their creations. The cultural significance of potion making varies widely across wizarding communities. British wizarding tradition places potion making firmly within the academic curriculum, treating it as a core magical discipline alongside charms and transfiguration. By contrast, many East African magical communities approach brewing as a community practice, with knowledge shared through apprenticeships rather than formal schooling. Native American medicine traditions often integrate potion making with ritual and ceremony in ways that European brewing typically does not. These cultural variations produce distinct brewing styles and specialized knowledge. Japanese wizards have developed unparalleled expertise in potions utilizing magical marine ingredients. Peruvian magical communities excel in botanical potions, drawing on the Amazon's unique magical flora. Nordic traditions have pioneered temperature-sensitive brewing techniques that harness the magical properties of ice and snow. This diversity of approaches ensures that potion making remains a vibrant, evolving discipline rather than a static body of knowledge. The relationship between potion making and other magical disciplines illustrates its unique position within wizarding education. Unlike charms or transfiguration, which draw directly on a witch or wizard's magical ability, potions allow those with even modest magical talent to achieve remarkable results through technical skill and knowledge. This accessibility makes potion making particularly valuable for witches and wizards, whose strengths lie in precision and patience rather than raw magical power. Potions complement other forms of magic in practical applications as well. Aurors rely on healing potions and antidotes as essential supplements to defensive spells. Professional Quidditch players use carefully regulated nutritional potions to support their training regimens. Magical researchers often employ clarity and focus potions to enhance their concentration during complex experimental work. This integration of brewing with other magical practices demonstrates how potions form an essential part of the overall magical ecosystem. The future of potion making promises continued innovation through both traditional methods and emerging magical technologies. Cross-disciplinary approaches combining potions with charm work or arithmetic calculations have yielded breakthroughs in personalized brewing potions specifically calibrated to an individual's magical signature. Research into time-sensitive ingredients offers the possibility of potions whose effects vary based on precise timing of consumption. The application of ancient brewing techniques to newly discovered magical substances continues to expand the potion maker's pharmacopoeia. Perhaps most significantly, modern potioneers increasingly recognize the importance of understanding why potions work, not merely how to brew them. This deeper theoretical approach, combining magical theory with something akin to Muggle chemistry and biology, represents a significant evolution from the primarily recipe-driven tradition of earlier centuries. By understanding the fundamental principles that govern ingredient interactions, modern researchers can predict new combinations rather than relying solely on trial and error. As our exploration of this fascinating discipline comes to a close, the imaginary cauldron before us cools, its contents now a perfect potion shimmering with completed magic. We've seen how potion making embodies both precise technique and intuitive artistry, how it balances ancient tradition with continuous innovation, and how it connects the physical properties of ingredients with their deeper magical essences. In this most subtle branch of magic, perhaps we find a reflection of wizarding culture itself, set a blend of careful measurement and inspired creativity, of respect for established knowledge, and the courage to discover new possibilities. And as you drift towards sleep this evening, you might consider, what potion would you most wish to brew if you possessed the necessary skill and ingredients? And what might that choice reveal about the magical possibilities you most wish to bring into being? Chapter 10. The Origins of the Shrieking Shack. Wind whistles through weathered planks. Moonlight casts long shadows through boarded windows, and the creaking of timbers gives voice to secrets long concealed. As the night deepens around us and our fire burns low, let us explore the true story behind Britain's most notorious haunted building, the Shrieking Shack of Hogsmeade, whose fearsome reputation conceals a tale of compassion, ingenuity, and one young wizard's monthly struggle with a condition that threatened to deny him the education he deserved. Standing on a small hill overlooking the village of Hogsmeade, the Shrieking Shack presents a foreboding silhouette against the sky. Its dilapidated exterior, with peeling paint and boarded windows, seems designed to repel visitors, and indeed, this was precisely the intention behind its creation. Yet, unlike most buildings in the wizarding world, which accumulate histories over centuries, the Shrieking Shack is a relatively recent addition to the landscape, constructed for a very specific purpose that few have ever known. The structure dates back only to the early 1970s, making it one of the newest buildings in Hogsmeade, a village whose other structures have stood for centuries. This modern origin contradicts the popular perception that the shack is an ancient dwelling with a long history of supernatural disturbances. In reality, its construction was commissioned specifically by Albus Dumbledore shortly before the start of the 1971 to 1972 school year at Hogwarts, timing that corresponds precisely with the arrival of a particular student, Remus Lupin, Remus Lupin's acceptance to Hogwarts represented a significant departure from previous school policy regarding students with lycanthropy. Prior to Dumbledore's tenure as headmaster, young werewolves were categorically denied admission to the school, their condition deemed too dangerous to manage within a populated educational setting. This exclusionary policy reflected broader societal prejudices against those afflicted with lycanthropy, who faced systematic discrimination throughout wizarding society. Dumbledore, however, held the revolutionary belief that magical education should be available to all magical children, regardless of conditions or circumstances beyond their control. When approached by Lyle and Hope Lupin regarding their son's education, Dumbledore did not see an insurmountable obstacle, but rather a challenge to be solved through magical ingenuity and careful planning. The central problem was straightforward but daunting: how to safely accommodate a student who once a month involuntarily transformed into a dangerous predator with no ability to distinguish friend from foe. Any solution would need to absolutely ensure the safety of both the student body and the young werewolf himself, while also maintaining strict confidentiality to protect Lupin from the stigma that would certainly follow if his condition became known. Dumbledore's solution demonstrated both magical creativity and psychological insight. Rather than attempting to contain Lupin's transformations within the castle itself, a approach too risky given the concentration of potential victims, he conceived of a separate facility specifically designed for this purpose. The location would need to be distant enough from both Hogwarts and Hogsmeade to prevent accidental encounters, yet accessible enough to allow Lupin to be transported there discreetly each month. The hilltop site chosen for the Shrieking Shack offered ideal isolation while remaining within manageable distance of the school. Construction proceeded quietly in the summer of 1971, overseen by a small team of trusted magical builders sworn to secrecy regarding the building's true purpose. To the residents of Hogsmeade, it was presented simply as a private residence commissioned by an eccentric client who valued extreme privacy, a cover story that raised few questions in a community accustomed to magical eccentricities. The architectural design of the shack reflected its dual purpose as both containment facility and misdirection. From the exterior, it was deliberately constructed to appear weathered and forbidding, with an aesthetic that suggested abandonment despite its newness. This uninviting appearance served as the first line of defense against curious visitors who might otherwise approach during Lupin's dangerous transformations. Inside, the building presented a study in magical reinforcement. What appeared to be ordinary wooden walls were actually layered with multiple containment charms and strengthening spells, creating barriers far stronger than their physical appearance suggested. Windows were not merely boarded over, but magically sealed from the inside. Furniture was specially constructed to withstand tremendous force, designed to provide minimal material that could be broken into dangerous fragments. Most importantly, the entire structure was encompassed by boundary wards that prevented a transformed werewolf from breaking through while in lupine form. These sophisticated protective enchantments represented some of the most advanced containment magic of their time, carefully calibrated to contain a werewolf's strength without causing additional harm to the human within the wolf. Access to this secure facility presented another challenge requiring magical innovation. A werewolf needed to reach the shack before transformation began, yet the route could not risk exposure to the student body or villagers. Dumbledore's solution was characteristically brilliant. A secret passage connecting Hogwarts grounds directly to the Shrieking Shack, its entrance concealed beneath a newly planted Whomping Willow. The Whomping Willow itself represented another layer of protective ingenuity. This rare and dangerous species of magical tree, with its violent thrashing branches, provided perfect security for the tunnel entrance. Only someone who knew the secret of immobilizing the tree, pressing a specific knot on its trunk, could safely approach the passage. This knowledge was initially limited to staff members directly involved in managing Lupin's condition: Dumbledore himself, Madame Pomfrey the school nurse, and later Professor McGonagall. With the physical infrastructure established, Dumbledore addressed the equally important challenge of social concealment. A student regularly disappearing to an unknown location would inevitably generate curiosity and speculation. Similarly, the sounds emanating from the shack during Lupin's painful transformations, howls, crashes, and splintering wood, would require explanation to prevent investigation by concerned villagers. The solution to both problems emerged from the human tendency to avoid what they fear. Rather than attempting to silence the disturbing sounds from the shack, Dumbledore allowed them to be heard throughout Hogsmeade, but circulated rumors that the building was haunted by particularly violent spirits. The wizarding community, with its experience of genuine hauntings, found this explanation entirely plausible. The headmaster likely encouraged this perception through subtle means, perhaps allowing Hogwarts ghosts to mention the terrible haunting in Hogsmeade within earshot of students, who would then carry the story home to their families. Before long, the shrieking sounds heard monthly from the hilltop building had given the structure its enduring name, and villagers began deliberately avoiding the area, especially at night. This cultivated reputation served multiple purposes. It explained Lupin's regular absences, as his monthly visits to the hospital wing for his illness could coincide with reported activity at the shack without raising suspicion. It ensured no curious students or villagers would approach during dangerous full moons. Perhaps most compassionately, it provided Lupin himself with psychological distance from the structure, allowing him to think of it as the Shrieking Shack rather than my transformation prison. The procedural routine established for Lupin's monthly transformations reflected careful attention to both safety and dignity. As the full moon approached, Madame Pomfrey would escort Lupin across the grounds at dusk, using her medical authority to deflect any questions about their destination. They would approach the Whomping Willow, temporarily immobilize it, and proceed through the tunnel to the shack. Inside, Lupin would be left alone before the transformation began, a consideration for his privacy during the painful process. The passage would be secured behind him, and he would remain confined until morning, when Madame Pomfrey would return to escort him to the hospital wing for recovery. To his classmates, he simply appeared to be a student with a chronic illness requiring regular medical attention, an explanation that, while generating some sympathy, raised few suspicious questions. This carefully orchestrated system worked effectively for almost 2 years, allowing Remus Lupin to receive the education that previous werewolves had been denied. The secret remained closely held, known only to Dumbledore, key staff members, and eventually Lupin's closest friends, James Potter, Sirius Black, and Peter Pettigrew, who deduced the truth through careful observation of the pattern of their friends' monthly disappearances. The discovery by his friends marked a transformative moment in both Lupin's personal experience and the Shrieking Shack's function. Rather than rejecting him upon learning of his condition, Potter, Black, and Pettigrew undertook the extraordinarily challenging process of becoming animagi, specifically to accompany Lupin during full moons. Their animal forms, stag, dog, and rat respectively, allowed them to safely interact with Lupin in his werewolf form without risk of infection or serious injury. This development fundamentally changed the nature of Lupin's time in the shack. What had been nights of self-destructive isolation became, if not pleasant, at least less traumatic experiences shared with loyal friends. The presence of the other animals seemed to calm the werewolf's more violent tendencies, reducing the self-inflicted injuries that had previously characterized Lupin's transformations. The Marauders, as they called themselves, eventually grew bold enough to venture beyond the shack during full moons, exploring the Hogwarts grounds and nearby forest while in animal form. These unauthorized excursions, while tremendously risky, reflected both teenage impulsivity and the genuine compassion that motivated Lupin's friends to alleviate his suffering by transforming his confinement into adventure. After Lupin's graduation in 1978, the Shrieking Shack returned to genuine abandonment, its monthly disturbances ceasing as suddenly as they had begun. This transition further cemented its reputation among Hogsmeade residents, who concluded that whatever malevolent spirits had haunted the building had finally moved on. The structure remained, serving as a physical reminder of both institutional compassion and societal fear, even as its original purpose faded into local legend. The shack would remain largely forgotten until 1993, when it once again became the setting for a pivotal moment in wizarding history. The confrontation between Sirius Black, Remus Lupin, and Peter Pettigrew, along with Harry Potter, Ron Weasley, and Hermione Granger, brought the building's original participants back to its confines. This encounter, which revealed the truth about the betrayal of James and Lily Potter, unfolded in the same space originally designed to protect a young werewolf from prejudice and exclusion. The physical features that made the Shrieking Shack appropriate for containing a transformed werewolf, its isolation, reinforced construction, and secret accessibility, made it equally suitable for this confrontation between fugitive, teacher, and traitor. The many layers of secrecy surrounding the building ensured the conversation could occur without interruption or discovery, even as momentous revelations and shifting allegations flew between its participants. In the years following the Second Wizarding War, the true purpose of the Shrieking Shack has remained known to relatively few. The building stands as a physical testament to both institutional compassion and societal fear, a structure built specifically to include someone society would have preferred to exclude, yet designed to appear forbidding precisely because of that same societal prejudice. Architecturally, the Shrieking Shack represents a unique example of magical construction designed with psychological deterrence as a primary function. Unlike most wizarding buildings, which typically utilize enchantments to appear inviting or impressive, the shack deliberately projects an atmosphere of danger and decay. This inversion of typical magical architecture reflects its unusual dual purpose, protection of both a vulnerable individual and an unknowing community. The magical engineering involved in creating this secure facility deserves recognition as well. The containment charms woven into its construction successfully held a fully transformed werewolf, one of the most powerful magical creatures, without failure for 7 years of monthly use. This achievement stands as a testament to the magical craftsmanship involved, particularly considering the building needed to restrain such force while avoiding additional harm to the human within the wolf. Beyond its physical construction, the Shrieking Shack represents something more profound in wizarding history, one of the earliest institutional accommodations for a condition previously deemed unmanageable. Dumbledore's willingness to create specialized infrastructure for a single student with unique needs marked a departure from the previous practice of simply excluding those who didn't fit standard educational models. This progressive approach contrasts sharply with the broader societal treatment of lycanthropy, which continued to be characterized by fear and discrimination long after Lupin's time at Hogwarts. The very need for such elaborate secrecy around the shack's purpose highlights the stigma attached to the condition, a stigma so powerful that Lupin himself internalized it, expecting rejection rather than accommodation throughout his life. Yet perhaps the most significant aspect of the Shrieking Shack's history lies not in its architectural or magical features, but in how it facilitated genuine friendship despite seemingly insurmountable barriers. The loyalty demonstrated by James Potter, Sirius Black, and Peter Pettigrew in supporting Remus Lupin, learning extremely difficult magic and risking their safety to accompany him during transformations, shows how accommodation designed for inclusion can create opportunities for profound human connection. As our exploration of this misunderstood structure concludes, the imagined creaking of its timbers fades into the quiet of our evening. The Shrieking Shack stands as a physical reminder that appearances can be deliberately deceiving, that fear often obscures compassion, and that spaces designed for exclusion can sometimes nurture the most meaningful inclusion. As you drift towards sleep, perhaps you might consider what other misunderstood places might have origins rooted in compassion rather than malevolence, and how might the structures we build, both physical and social, better accommodate those differences we too often fear rather than embrace. Chapter 11. The Power of the Philosopher's Stone. Some magical objects transcend mere enchantment to become legend-tes artifacts, where the boundary between possible and impossible grows thin. As our evening together continues, and the shadows lengthen across our walls, let us delve into the mysteries of perhaps the most remarkable magical creation in recorded history, the Philosopher's Stone. This legendary substance, which promises endless wealth and eternal life, represents the pinnacle of alchemical achievement and embodies humanity's most persistent dreams. Alchemy itself stands as one of the oldest magical arts, predating the formal division between magical and non-magical sciences. It emerged independently in multiple ancient civilizations. Egyptian, Chinese, Indian, and Mesopotamian texts all contain early alchemical formulations. These traditions shared a common fascination with transformation, particularly the purification of base materials into more perfect forms. The dream of transmuting common metals into gold appears consistently across these diverse cultures, as does the search for an elixir that might extend human life indefinitely. What began as largely separate traditions gradually merged through centuries of scholarly exchange, creating a rich alchemical tradition that blended practical chemistry, spiritual philosophy, and magical theory. By the medieval period, European alchemists had developed a sophisticated symbolic language and experimental methodology that combined rigorous observation with intuitive magical understanding, an approach that would eventually lead to the creation of the Philosopher's Stone. The alchemical pursuit of the stone was not merely a quest for material wealth, though that aspect certainly attracted many practitioners. At its philosophical core, alchemy sought to understand the fundamental nature of transformation itself, how substances could change their essential properties while maintaining some underlying continuity. This investigation into the nature of change extended beyond material substances to include spiritual and magical transformations as well. In alchemical texts, the Philosopher's Stone represents the ultimate catalyst, the perfect agent of transformation capable of elevating any substance to its ideal form. Gold, being considered the most perfect metal, was the natural result of applying the stone to lesser metals. Similarly, the elixir of life derived from the stone was thought to perfect the human body, eliminating disease and aging by bringing physical form into harmony with its ideal spiritual state. For centuries, the stone remained purely theoretical, with countless alchemists dedicating their lives to its pursuit without success. The fundamental challenge lay in the necessary unity of opposites. The stone required the perfect balance of contradictory elements, a harmony of polarities that proved nearly impossible to achieve through conventional magical means. Most alchemists who claimed success were eventually exposed as frauds or deluded by imperfect results that temporarily mimicked true transmutation. Then, in the 14th century, a breakthrough occurred. Nicolas Flamel, a French alchemist and bookshop owner, acquired an obscure alchemical text that would change the course of his life and magical history. The book, reportedly entitled The Book of Abraham the Jew, contained cryptic illustrations and formulations that initially baffled Flamel. Despite his considerable alchemical knowledge, after decades of study and numerous consultations with scholars throughout Europe, Flamel gradually deciphered the text's symbolism. Historical records suggest he made his first successful transmutation in 1382, converting a small quantity of mercury into silver and then gold. This achievement, remarkable as it was, represented only the beginning of his alchemical success. The true creation of the Philosopher's Stone required additional years of refinement and experimentation. Flamel worked closely with his wife, Perenelle, herself an accomplished alchemist, whose contributions are often overlooked in historical accounts. Together, they achieved what generations of alchemists had only dreamed of: the creation of a perfect catalyst capable of transforming both matter and life itself. The physical appearance of the Philosopher's Stone belies its extraordinary power. Contemporary descriptions suggest a deep red, translucent substance resembling a crystal or gemstone. Its colors associated in alchemical symbolism with perfection and completion too reflects its nature as the end result of the great work of alchemy. Despite its gem-like appearance, the stone possesses unique physical properties that distinguish it from ordinary minerals, including an unusual warmth to the touch and subtle luminosity that seems to emanate from within rather than reflect external light. The process of creating the stone remains one of wizardkind's most closely guarded secrets, known in its entirety perhaps only to the Flamels themselves. What is known with certainty is that the process is extraordinarily complex, requiring precise astronomical timing, rare magical ingredients, and transmutative procedures that must be maintained continuously for months or even years. Alchemical texts suggest that certain steps must be performed only during specific planetary alignments that occur rarely, explaining why even knowledgeable alchemists might require decades to complete the work. Beyond these technical requirements, successful creation of the stone appears to demand a particular philosophical approach and state of mind. Alchemical writings emphasize that the creator must achieve internal harmony, reflecting the material harmony they seek to create, a unity of intellectual understanding and spiritual insight that few wizards ever attain. This suggests that the creation of the Philosopher's Stone represents not merely a technical achievement, but a profound magical and spiritual accomplishment. The two primary powers attributed to the Philosopher's Stone's set metal transmutation and the production of the elixir of life tea represent perfect examples of how alchemical magic differs from conventional spellwork. Unlike transfiguration, which temporarily alters an object's form while leaving its fundamental nature unchanged, the stone's transmutation permanently transforms a substance's essential properties. Lead becomes not something that appears as gold or functions temporarily as gold, but actual gold at the most fundamental magical and material level. The elixir of life demonstrates even more remarkable properties. Unlike conventional healing potions which target specific ailments or injuries, the elixir fundamentally reinforces the drinker's life force, preventing aging and most forms of disease through continuous rejuvenation. Regular consumption essentially freezes the aging process, allowing a witch or wizard to maintain their physical condition indefinitely. Nicholas and Perenelle Flamel, through regular use of the elixir, survived for over 6 centuries, an unprecedented lifespan even in the magical world. The practical applications of these powers made the Philosopher's Stone perhaps the most valuable magical object ever created. The ability to produce unlimited quantities of gold would have granted the Flamels inconceivable wealth had they chosen to exploit this capability fully. However, historical evidence suggests they used their alchemical gold primarily to fund charitable works, establishing hospitals and shelters throughout France while living comfortably, but not extravagantly themselves. This restraint reflects the philosophical maturity necessary to create the stone in the first place. The Flamels appear to have understood that unlimited wealth, if misused, could destabilize economic systems and corrupt the possessor. Similarly, they kept the elixir of life largely to themselves and a very small circle of associates, recognizing that immortality, if widely available, would fundamentally alter wizarding society in potentially catastrophic ways. Despite their discretion, knowledge of the stone's existence spread throughout the alchemical community and eventually to the wider wizarding world. The Flamels found themselves surrounded by those seeking their secret some driven by intellectual curiosity, others by greed or fear of death. This unwanted attention necessitated increasingly complex security measures and periodic relocations, a pattern that characterized much of their extended lives. Their most significant collaboration occurred with Albus Dumbledore, whose own alchemical work with the Flamels produced several important discoveries documented in academic journals of the early 20th century. This professional relationship eventually became a friendship that would prove crucial centuries after the stone's creation, when new threats emerged to target the legendary artifact. The temptation presented by the Philosopher's Stone naturally attracted those with dark ambitions throughout history. Various dark wizards attempted to steal or replicate the stone over the centuries, all without success, until the particularly dangerous threat posed by Lord Voldemort in the early 1990s. Reduced to a spectral existence after his failed attempt to kill Harry Potter, Voldemort sought the stone as a means of restoring his physical form and securing immortality. This threat led to the stone's relocation from Gringotts to Hogwarts under Dumbledore's protection, guarded by a series of magical obstacles created by the school's professors. These protections sent from Devil's Snare to flying keys to a giant wizard's chess set were designed not merely to prevent theft, but to specifically challenge Voldemort's known magical strengths while being potentially surmountable by those pure of intention. The final protection, Dumbledore's enchanted Mirror of Erised, demonstrated particular ingenuity in its moral dimension, by making the stone accessible only to someone who wanted to find it but not use it. This protection leveraged the very power of desire that drove Voldemort's quest, turning his overwhelming ambition against him. That this sophisticated magical trap was ultimately negotiated by an 11-year-old Harry Potter represents one of history's great magical ironies. The aftermath of these events led Nicholas Flamel to make the extraordinary decision to destroy the Philosopher's Stone suit, effectively choosing mortality over continued life. This choice, after 6 centuries of existence, speaks to both the stone's genuine power and the wisdom that likely enabled its creation in the first place. The Flamels recognized that no security measure could permanently protect such a coveted object, and that its continued existence posed too great a risk to the wizarding world. The destruction of the stone raises fascinating questions about its unique magical nature. That it could be destroyed at all suggests it maintained some material vulnerability despite its extraordinary powers. Whether the destruction required special alchemical processes or could be accomplished through conventional magical means remains unclear, though the involvement of Dumbledore implies sophisticated magical knowledge was necessary. More poignantly, the Flamel's acceptance of mortality after centuries of life represents a profound philosophical statement about the nature of existence itself. Having experienced a lifespan that fulfilled humanity's ancient dream of immortality, they ultimately chose the natural cycle of life and death, suggesting that perhaps eternal life, once experienced, reveals limitations not apparent to those who have never tasted it. The philosophical implications of the Philosopher's Stone extend far beyond its practical applications. Its very existence challenges our understanding of fundamental magical principles. Most permanent magical transformations require tremendous power and specific circumstantial conditions, yet the stone appears to violate these limitations, enabling transformations that would otherwise be impossible. This exceptional nature has led magical theorists to propose that the stone doesn't simply channel or direct magical energy like a wand or other magical tool. Rather, it may represent a unique magical nexus, a point where the normal boundaries between different types of magic break down, allowing transmutations that cross the usual categorical limitations of spellwork. This would explain why conventional magical approaches failed to replicate the stone's effects, as they operated within the very boundaries the stone transcended. The alchemical tradition that produced the stone offers further insights into its exceptional nature. Unlike compartmentalized modern magical education, alchemy integrated aspects of transfiguration, potions, charms, and even divination into a unified approach to magical manipulation. This holistic perspective may have been crucial to achieving what specialized magical disciplines could not, suggesting that sometimes magical breakthroughs require transcending the very categories we use to understand magic. In examining the Philosopher's Stone, we must also consider its ethical dimensions. The power to create unlimited gold raises obvious economic concerns. Widespread use of alchemical gold could destabilize currency values and undermine the financial systems of both magical and Muggle worlds. Similarly, the elixir of life's potential to grant indefinite lifespan raises profound questions about natural cycles and the social implications of immortality. Would a society of immortals continue to innovate and evolve, or would it stagnate under the influence of unchanging perspectives? How would familial relationships function across endless generations? Would resources become increasingly concentrated in the hands of the long-lived? The Flamel's eventual decision to destroy the stone suggests they may have grappled with these very questions during their centuries of life. Beyond these practical concerns lie deeper philosophical questions about the meaning of human existence. Much of what gives life purpose, the drive to achieve, create, and experience before our time ends, might be fundamentally altered by the removal of mortality's boundary. The stone's power to indefinitely extend life forces us to consider whether immortality, so long dreamed of, might actually diminish rather than enhance the human experience. As our exploration of this remarkable magical achievement draws to a close, we might reflect on why the Philosopher's Stone continues to captivate the wizarding imagination long after its destruction. Perhaps it represents more than simply a path to gold and longevity, Sid. Perhaps it symbolizes the ultimate alchemical truth that transformation itself is the greatest magic of all. In its creation, use, and ultimate destruction, the Philosopher's Stone embodies the full circle of alchemical wisdom. That pursuit of perfection leads eventually to the recognition that perfection itself may lie in accepting impermanence rather than defying it. As you drift towards sleep this evening, perhaps you might consider, if offered the elixir of life, would you choose extended years, or might you, like the Flamels, eventually discover that the natural boundaries of existence hold their own form of perfection, that even the greatest magic cannot improve upon? Chapter 12. The Secrets of the Chamber of Secrets. Deep beneath the foundations of Hogwarts Castle lies a chamber that remained hidden for centuries, its existence questioned by generations of students and scholars alike. As our time together draws toward its conclusion, and the final embers of our fire cast their gentle glow across the room, let us descend into the shadowy depths of the castle to uncover the true history of Salazar Slytherin's most notorious legacy, the Chamber of Secrets. The story begins, as many of wizarding history's most consequential events do, with the founding of Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry over 1,000 years ago. The four greatest witches and wizards of the age, Godric Gryffindor, Helga Hufflepuff, Rowena Ravenclaw, and Salazar Slytherin Set, created an institution that would forever transform magical education in Britain. Yet beneath their shared vision lay fundamental disagreements about who deserved such education, disagreements that would eventually lead to irreparable division. Salazar Slytherin's departure from Hogwarts marked the end of the founders' collaboration, but historical evidence suggests he left behind more than merely his name on one of the four houses. Before abandoning the school he had helped create, Slytherin constructed a hidden chamber unknown to his fellow founders, thus a secret room that would come to embody his most controversial beliefs about blood purity and magical heritage. The earliest historical reference to this hidden space appears in writings dating to approximately 50 years after Slytherin's departure. A manuscript attributed to Helena Brocklehurst, an early Hogwarts administrator, mentions rumors among students of Slytherin House regarding a concealed hall crafted by their founder's own hand. This reference is vague and offers no details about the chamber's location or purpose, suggesting the information was already passing into legend rather than documented fact. Throughout subsequent centuries, the chamber's existence remained a persistent rumor, periodically resurging whenever tensions regarding blood status intensified within the wizarding community. Historical records indicate at least 7 organized searches for the chamber between the 12th and 19th centuries, all failing to locate any evidence of its existence. These repeated failures led many magical historians to conclude that the chamber was merely symbolic, a metaphorical representation of Slytherin's separate vision rather than a physical space within the castle. The difficulty in locating the chamber stemmed from Slytherin's extraordinary magical ingenuity in its construction. Unlike other hidden rooms and passageways throughout Hogwarts, which could be discovered through conventional magical detection, the Chamber of Secrets incorporated concealment enchantments tied specifically to Slytherin's bloodline. These protections ensured that only his direct descendants, specifically those who inherited his rare ability to speak Parseltongue Tude, could access the chamber. This genetic key proved remarkably effective. For centuries, even dedicated searchers with significant magical skill failed to locate the entrance, which Slytherin had hidden in what would later become a girl's bathroom on the second floor. The entrance itself represented a masterpiece of magical concealment, Sippel sink marked with a small serpent emblem, designed to respond only to commands given in Parseltongue. What lay beyond this entrance remained unknown to the wizarding world at large until the chamber was first opened in 1943 by a 16-year-old Tom Riddle, later to become Lord Voldemort. As a direct descendant of Salazar Slytherin through the Gaunt family, Riddle possessed both the genetic key, Parseltongue, and the ideological alignment with Slytherin's views on blood purity that enabled him to locate and access the chamber where generations had failed. The physical reality of the chamber, when finally discovered, proved both less and more than the legends suggested. Rather than the grand hall of popular imagination, the main pathway consisted of a long, damp stone tunnel extending deep beneath the lake, culminating in a door emblazoned with serpents that also required Parseltongue to open. Beyond this door lay the chamber proper, sought a vast stone hall lined with towering pillars carved in the form of serpents, dominated by an enormous statue of Salazar Slytherin himself. The architecture of the chamber reflects Slytherin's personality and values. The serpentine motifs throughout Hist, from the entwined stone snakes to the serpent tongue locks, set emphasize his connection to Parseltongue and his house emblem. The monumental statue suggests both pride and a desire for his presence to literally oversee his legacy. The chamber's location beneath the lake aligns with the dungeons where Slytherin House would later reside, emphasizing depth, secrecy, and separation from the upper regions of the castle associated with the other founders. Most significantly, the chamber contained Slytherin's most terrible legacy, said a basilisk, a giant serpent with the power to kill with a single glance, placed there to one day purge the school of those Slytherin deemed unworthy to study magic. This creature represented the ultimate expression of Slytherin's beliefs regarding blood purity, a sleeping sentinel that would one day carry out its creator's intentions long after his death. The choice of a basilisk as the chamber's guardian demonstrates Slytherin's magical sophistication and strategic thinking. As a Parselmoth, he could communicate with and control this deadly creature while ensuring that only his descendants would share this ability. The basilisk's extraordinary longevity, Sevet capable of living for hundreds or even thousands of years Sep, made it an ideal long-term weapon for his purposes. Most cunningly, its method of killing left no physical marks, making its victims appear to have died from mysterious but natural causes that would be difficult to trace back to their true source. When Tom Riddle first opened the chamber in 1943, he unleashed the basilisk against Muggle-born students, resulting in several petrifications and ultimately the death of a student named Myrtle Warren. This tragedy nearly resulted in Hogwarts closure, which Riddle too, despite his hatred for Muggles and Muggle-borns too, could not allow, as the school represented his only true home. To prevent the closure, he framed fellow student Rubeus Hagrid for the attacks and sealed the chamber once more, leaving its secrets intact for another 50 years. The chamber remained sealed until 1992 to 1993, when it was opened again, this time through the unwitting actions of Ginny Weasley, possessed by a fragment of Tom Riddle's consciousness preserved in his diary, Horcrux. This second opening resulted in another series of petrifications, but fortunately no deaths, thanks to the coincidental circumstances that prevented any victims from meeting the basilisk's gaze directly. The events culminated in Ginny Weasley being taken into the chamber itself, leading Harry Potter to discover the entrance, speak Parseltongue to gain access, and confront both the basilisk and the memory of Tom Riddle preserved in the diary. Potter's victory, slaying the basilisk with Godric Gryffindor's sword, and destroying the diary with a basilisk fang suft, represents a powerful symbolic resolution to the ancient conflict between Slytherin and the other founders. The heir of Slytherin's monster, defeated by a Gryffindor weapon wielded by a half-blood wizard who embodied the inclusive vision that Slytherin had rejected. Following these events, the Chamber of Secrets became accessible to the wizarding world for the first time in history. With the basilisk dead and its entrance known, the chamber transitioned from active threat to historical artifact. Magical historians and researchers finally gained the opportunity to study this legendary space, though access remained limited by the parcel tongue requirement until alternative means of entry were eventually established. Examination of the chamber by magical archaeologists revealed several significant findings beyond its obvious features. Analysis of the stonework indicated that, while the chamber was indeed created during the Founder's era, it had been modified and expanded by Slytherin's descendants over generations. Magical residue suggested at least 3 significant periods of construction, likely corresponding to visits by Slytherin's heirs who possessed the necessary parcel tongue ability to access the space. The most intriguing discoveries came from the small antechambers adjoining the main hall, which contained preserved writings and artifacts from Slytherin himself. These materials offered unprecedented insight into his thinking and the sophisticated magic he employed in the chamber's creation. Among these findings were journals detailing the breeding and control of the basilisk, suggesting that the creature was specifically engineered for its purpose, rather than simply acquired cittan, a feat of magical husbandry that would be considered extraordinary even by modern standards. The chamber's magical protections proved equally remarkable upon closer study. Beyond the parcel tongue requirements, the space incorporated sophisticated concealment charms woven into the very stone, making the chamber unplottable even on the most detailed magical maps of Hogwarts. These protections extended to sound isolation, explaining how a creature as large and potentially vocal as the basilisk remained undetected for centuries, despite the chamber's proximity to occupied areas of the castle. Perhaps most impressive was the environmental magic that maintained the chamber's habitability for the basilisk over centuries. The space contained self-sustaining enchantments that regulated temperature, humidity, and air quality, while a network of small tunnels connecting to the lake provided both fresh water and access to food sources for the serpent. These systems functioned continuously for nearly 1,000 years without maintenance, demonstrating magical engineering far beyond typical charm work of the Founder's era. The chamber's relationship with the rest of Hogwarts raises fascinating questions about the castle's magical architecture. That such a significant space could exist undetected within the Foundation suggests that Hogwarts may contain other hidden areas created by the Founders or subsequent headmasters. Some magical theorists propose that the castle itself might possess a form of sentience that accepted the chamber as part of its structure, incorporating it into the building's magical ecosystem despite its secretive creation. From a historical perspective, the Chamber of Secrets represents a physical manifestation of the ideological conflicts that have periodically divided the wizarding world. Slytherin's creation of a hidden space dedicated to his vision of blood, purity foreshadowed similar movements throughout magical history, from the anti-Muggle rhetoric of the 17th century to the pure-blood supremacist ideology that fueled both Grindelwald's and Voldemort's rises to power. Yet the chamber also demonstrates how such ideologies ultimately fail. Despite Slytherin's extraordinary magical skill and careful planning, his monster was defeated not by another pure-blood, but by a half-blood wizard, aided by a phoenix, a magical creature associated with Dumbledore and the inclusive values he championed. The basilisk, bred to eliminate those of Muggle heritage, met its end at the hands of precisely the kind of wizard Slytherin would have rejected. Cit, a powerful symbolic repudiation of his founding philosophy. In the aftermath of the Second Wizarding War, the Chamber of Secrets acquired new significance as wizarding society reassessed its relationship with its own history. Rather than sealing or destroying this troubling legacy, Hogwarts chose to preserve the chamber as a historical site and educational resource. Controlled visits by upper-level students studying magical history provide an opportunity to confront the darker aspects of the wizarding past directly, rather than through sanitized accounts. This approach reflects a broader shift in how the wizarding community addresses its complex heritage. Acknowledging rather than concealing the prejudices that have periodically threatened magical society. The chamber, once a secret weapon for eliminating those deemed unworthy, now serves as a powerful reminder of where such thinking leads and the importance of resisting similar ideologies in the present. For modern students descending into the chamber's depths, the experience offers a tangible connection to the founding era of Hogwarts and a sobering reminder of how even the most brilliant wizards can be blinded by prejudice. The statue of Salazar Slytherin, once meant to inspire awe among his worthy descendants, now stands as a monument to flawed greatness. A wizard whose undeniable talents were ultimately misdirected by his inability to embrace the diversity that would become Hogwarts' greatest strength. The legacy of the chamber extends beyond its physical space to influence how we understand Slytherin House itself. For centuries, the chamber's association with Slytherin reinforced negative perceptions of his house and its members. In the reformed wizarding society emerging after Voldemort's defeat, educators have worked to separate Slytherin's positive qualities, ambition, resourcefulness, determination set from the blood prejudice embodied in his hidden chamber. This more nuanced approach acknowledges that houses, like the wizards and witches who created them, contain multitudes sent both admirable traits and problematic tendencies that each generation must navigate anew. The Chamber of Secrets, rather than defining Slytherin legacy, now represents just one aspect of a complex historical figure whose full story encompasses both remarkable achievement and profound failure. As our exploration of this most mysterious chamber draws to its close, we might reflect on the power of secrets themselves in the wizarding world. Salazar Slytherin's hidden chamber remained concealed for centuries, its very existence questioned by many, yet its influence shaped events far beyond its stone walls. Perhaps there is a broader lesson here about how the past, however deeply buried, inevitably finds its way back into the light, and how the secrets we keep ultimately reveal more about ourselves than about those from whom we hide them. As you drift toward sleep, with the whispers of basilisks and the echoes of ancient magic fading from your mind, consider this final question: what chambers might exist within our own hearts, hidden even from ourselves, waiting for the right word to reveal their secrets? And what might we discover, for better or worse, when those inner doors finally open to the light of conscious examination?